The ceremony Ms. Miller had arranged was the next day. The night before, posters went up in the multipurpose media auditorium. One of the great things about a university campus is that there's always something going on: lectures, events, workshops. As a student, you were free to attend whatever you wanted. You could check the promotional posters, the news boards, or the campus intranet for updates. If you had free time, you could go. If you were really determined to see something, you could even skip class. The biggest difference between high school and college was probably that freedom of choice. In college, you could choose what you wanted to learn and what you didn't, as long as you didn't fail your classes. In high school, you had to learn everything for the exams. There was no choice. Ms. Miller had chosen a photo of Leo for the poster, but she didn't make attendance mandatory. She knew how these things worked. Students would decide for themselves. When a rockstar professor gave a lecture, the room would be packed to the rafters. If the speaker was some uninspired hack just going through the motions, you might only get a handful of students looking for a quiet place with good AC. Sometimes, to make an event look well-attended, a professor might lean on the student government or a relevant club to wrangle up an audience. Freshmen were the usual targets, unfamiliar with the ropes and still eager to please. You told them attendance will be taken, and they'd show up. By sophomore year, they weren't so compliant. Juniors would flat out ignore you. And seniors? You'd be lucky to even see one on campus. So Ms. Miller just put out the announcement and the posters. She wasn't expecting a huge crowd and didn't ask the student government to force anyone to come. Mostly, she knew her aunt, President Grant, disliked empty formalities. The goal was to get through the proceedings efficiently, without wasting time or making any mistakes. She'd chosen the large auditorium because it would look good in photos. The backdrop was professional and impressive. When the time came, President Grant and Dean Roberts arrived together, along with the two officials and the staffer from Conchi County. The visitors were struggling to acclimate to Bridgeport's climate. It was the kind of damp cold that seeped into your bones, yet they saw students walking around without proper coats, some even in ripped jeans with their bare knees showing. The forced air heat indoors wasn't much better. It was stuffy and dry, nothing like the steady, comforting warmth of a radiator or a wood stove. They were already nostalgic for the crisp, dry cold of their hometown. As beautiful as the campus was, like a scenic park with its vast lake, groves of trees, and meticulously kept gardens, they felt physically uncomfortable, a constant stickiness on their skin. You always think the grass is greener somewhere else, but your body always remembers home. Leo was also heading to the auditorium. He figured it would be like his Bridgewater Fellowship induction, just a few people to witness the ceremony, and then it would be over. Sean came with him, camera in hand, to film his daily content. The TikTok numbers are exploding today, Sean said. The growth is like 1,000% higher than usual. It's probably Penelope Hayes' marketing team, Leo replied. The show is about to premiere, so they'll be ramping up promotions. Sean nodded. That made sense. Sometimes a random, unexplained spike in followers could be just as unnerving as no growth at all. They met first in a small office next to the auditorium. Sean's skin was naturally tanned. The moment he walked in, the men from Conchi County recognized a kindred spirit. They were weathered by the same sun, a deep tan that never quite faded. The youngest of the officials, a man in his early 30s who had been Sean's point of contact over the phone, was especially warm, shaking his hand enthusiastically. When Sean spoke, his accent sealed it, a rural twang that flattened his vowels. This was their first time meeting their benefactor in person. They knew he was a young student, but they hadn't expected him to be this young. He looked like one of their own younger relatives home from college for the holidays, a little shy and reserved. Leo had spent the morning studying, diving into his medical texts and Japanese lessons. He'd pushed his intermediate Japanese proficiency to 60%, unlocking another portion of Thomas Jefferson's penmanship. He now took meticulous notes as he studied, finding it far more efficient. The fountain pen felt substantial in his hand, gliding more smoothly than any ballpoint. His notebook was filled with his elegant script. The study session was fulfilling but exhausting. He felt that familiar brain burn, and the classroom's chill was the only thing keeping him from feeling like his thoughts were simmering. After he finished, he chugged 2 yogurts and finally felt himself coming back to life. He'd skipped lunch at the private kitchen, not wanting the hassle. But Chef Wood sent a lunchbox over to the dorm anyway. Jordan had gone over to the restaurant. He was currently obsessed with making craft coffee and cocktails, and his newfound passion had him eager to get out of the dorm and move his lazy bones, as he put it. Alex, meanwhile, was buried in work. What had started as a simple food festival was ballooning into a massive event. To his shock, he discovered that a huge number of people were coming specifically for Silas, the character Leo played. A quick search online revealed the truth. Leo had a Twitter account he'd made when he joined the cast, posted the one required promotional tweet, and then promptly forgot about. But fans have found it. The account was registered at Northwood State, revealing his IP location. From there, a little digital sleuthing led them to the university's official website, where they found news about Silas, their beloved team master. The fans were ecstatic. He was real. He was here. They could see him. And so they were coming. Originally, Alex wanted to make the festival seem official, had a few computer science students create a simple registration webpage, like a digital invitation with a QR code for an entry pass. It was meant to be a rough headcount tool. Now, the staffer monitoring registrations was seeing an influx of applications from not just the university or the city, but from out of state. Then, from out of the country. There were IP addresses from Canada, the UK, even Australia. Alex had told the students to add the IP locator as a cosmetic feature, never imagining it would track people from across the world. The university had a photographer on site, but Sean's camera was there to capture the real story. That same day, the university's official website published a news brief about the donation ceremony. The language was sterile and formal, concisely stating who did what, where, and when. It was a factual account, stripped of adjectives, accompanied by a single, serious photo taken against the auditorium's official-looking backdrop. Anyone who studies media knows that official reports like this operate on a single principle: truth. The cost of fabrication is far too high. They don't lie, but the wording requires careful interpretation. A single sentence, while true, can mean vastly different things depending on how you read it. A discerning eye could excavate layers of meaning, finding the real story buried in the dry, factual prose. Sean's post, however, was a short, deeply moving documentary. He'd asked the officials from Kangxi County for the photos and videos they'd taken on their journey, woven them together with footage from the university, and created a powerful narrative. It started with their first meeting, the awkward exchange of pleasantries, the gift of dried wild mushrooms. It moved to the formal ceremony, the applause, the smiling faces of the students clapping enthusiastically. It culminated in a shot of Leo and President Grant, the presentation slide in the background showing the rugged landscape of Kangxi County, where you could see the distant, snow-capped mountains from a window. He even had the staffer who'd called him record a voiceover. We took a long train ride to a beautiful university. The man's voice said, his accent thick but earnest. We met the young man we came to see and gave him the dried mushrooms we'd carefully protected the whole way. He accepted them with a smile. We were there to thank him, to present him with a banner, a certificate, and letters from the people he helped. The ceremony was wonderful. Our work was done, and my two bosses were shivering. It's so cold down here. The video was told from the perspective of the Kangxi County official. His unique, unpolished accent made it feel real and intimate. Some viewers might find it familiar, a comforting sound of home. Others would simply hear its authenticity. A polished, newscaster voice would have ruined it, shattering the emotional connection. Sean's editing skills had improved dramatically. He used a montage sequence with seamless transitions, pulling the viewer along. The video was touching enough to bring a tear to your eye, but the ending yanked you back with a gentle laugh. It showed that impoverished places held breathtaking beauty, and that modern college students possessed a deep well of kindness. You'd find your eyes misting over one moment and smiling the next. It was a masterful piece of short-form art. The culmination of his daily practice, of filming and editing day in and day out, had finally been catalyzed by watching Penelope Hayes' work on the Chancellor's Gambit. A quantitative leap had become a qualitative one. He could now tell a complete story with his camera, a final project goal for most film school graduates. As Leo was growing, so was Sean, the one always filming him. It was a perfect short film. The story was clear, moving, and tinged with humor. It was better than what most people could produce. So many creators focused on flashy techniques and slick visuals, but failed to tell a coherent story, then blamed the audience for not being sophisticated enough to get it. Sean followed his usual routine: shoot, edit, upload. He sent the finished video to Leo for a final look. "Looks good," Leo said, and Sean posted it. The two-step approval process might seem a bit cumbersome, but Sean insisted on it, just in case he missed something. Leo, too, had come to appreciate it. At first, he'd just given a blind okay, but now he always took a moment to watch. As Alex had said, it was a good system to establish early. Even in a two-person operation, you needed rules. They were useless when things were going well, but when something went wrong, they made it easy to trace the problem to its source. To them, it was just another video, not much different from their others. After the ceremony, President Grant gave a brief, concluding speech. Brevity was her style. She rarely spoke for more than 5 minutes. Her words were practical and direct, just like her. She explained the reason for the ceremony, praised Leo, and shared her own thoughts. She concluded by hoping that students would learn from Leo's example, not by donating money, but by doing what they could, however small. No act of kindness, no matter how small, is ever wasted, she said. And no act of malice, no matter how small, should ever be taken. It starts with you. She painted a picture of a future where they could not only take care of themselves, but also help others, forging their own meaningful paths. The short speech ended. Leo said his goodbyes to the president, professors, and officials. He had to get to work. He invited the Kangxi County delegation to his restaurant for dinner, but they firmly declined. They were too embarrassed. Hearing that Leo not only ran a restaurant on campus, but also cooked himself, was deeply moving. If a benefactor was fantastically wealthy, you'd be grateful for their donation, of course. But if the donor was just a normal student, one who worked hard at his own small business to make ends meet, well, that was something else entirely. Anyone who'd ever worked in food service knew how grueling it was. The money he had donated could have saved him all that hard work. He could have just relaxed, as the kids say. That fact made his generosity all the more profound. The officials politely refused the dinner invitation, saying they wanted to explore the city before heading home the next day. President Grant dispatched Dean Roberts to show them around. The dean handled most of the university's hosting duties. He wasn't the most emotionally intelligent person, but he wasn't clueless either. He was straightforward, a trait some might see as a liability in institutional life. But President Grant valued it. A university, she believed, didn't need slick operators. It needed honest people who held the line, who weren't afraid to speak their minds or ruffle a few feathers. Night fell, and the campus buzzed with the energy of its young inhabitants. In the wake of the pandemic, many people had developed a fondness for wandering through universities just to be around crowds, to feel the thrum of life. There was a collective fear of being alone, of a life ending in a small, cramped room. Better to fall by the roadside, where at least a butterfly might pass by. People had a new perspective. The things that once seemed important no longer were, and the things once dismissed as trivial now held all the meaning. Some people, like Jordan, are born understanding this truth. He had a genius for non-essential pursuits, and in that arena, he was miles ahead of the competition. His current venture was the restaurant's New Day Cafe night bar concept. At 6 p.m., the coffee service stopped. It was a signal to the workhorses of the world to stop fueling their anxiety with caffeine and switch to alcohol, a necessary anesthetic to prolong their productive lives. Jordan had thrown himself into mixology. Whether his cocktails tasted good was debatable, but they were undeniably beautiful, shimmering, layered concoctions of purple, white, red, black, and silver. It was clear he'd spent his fair share of time in chem lab. He worked for free, but he burned through the bar's inventory of liquor, syrups, and mixers at an astonishing rate. He found a new obsession and was learning everything he could, watching tutorials online, joining bartender forums, and lurking in professional subreddits. These days, he spent his time in the dorm grinding in video games and his time at the restaurant grinding coffee beans and shaking cocktails. In a way, Jordan was the perfect employee. He may not have been saving his boss money on supplies. The cost of his experiments far exceeded any salary he might have earned, but bosses love to see an employee who looks busy. As long as someone is hustling, it feels like the money is well spent. Profit and loss are for the accountants at the end of the month. And Jordan didn't just work hard. He was the life of the party. When Leo came out for a break and sat at the bar, Jordan immediately announced he'd invented a new drink and demanded the boss's expert opinion. Leo sighed. "Bring it on." "Yes, sir." Jordan chirped, a surprisingly nimble large man. His flair bartending, all flashy wrist flicks and spins, put the posturing actors on set to shame. As he shook the cocktail tin, his stomach jiggled with the rhythm of a tidal wave. Spotting Sean filming, he shot a flirtatious wink at the camera. If your definition of beauty included a portly frame, a beard, and a round, squinty-eyed face, Jordan would have been a supermodel. He was a master of his own brand of effortless cool, and Leo envied him for it. He felt like Jordan's relaxed attitude was rubbing off on him. When you're doing something, just do it. Don't overthink. Everything else is secondary. Jordan theatrically prepared 3 drinks. One for himself, one for Leo, and one for Sean. Alex wasn't there tonight, a student government meeting. Stella was home for the weekend. Thankfully, Jessica Monroe was there to help, and Mr. Lou had also shown up after his day at the horse ranch. Mr. Lou was a diligent worker, splitting his time between the ranch and the restaurant. Jessica had recently brokered a deal for an influencer she used to work for. The product sold well, and she cleared a commission of about $4,500 after putting up a small initial investment. But a second deal fell through. As a small-time freelance agent, she quickly ran into the classic problem. Once she connected the two parties, they simply cut her out of the next transaction. She'd known it was a risk. Still, making $4,500 in one go was a huge win. At her old part-time job, that would have taken her over a year to earn. With that one-time success, and no longer having to cover her dad's monthly credit card bills, her own expenses were manageable. Plus, she had the $30,000 Ms. Zhu had given her sitting untouched in her bank account. Having that cushion made her feel like she could stand up straighter, look people in the eye. She still wasn't sure what to do next. When she first met Ms. Zhu, she felt a surge of ambition mixed with a bitter sense of inadequacy. The classic case of champagne dreams on a beer budget. She'd even dragged Stella along to visit a factory, convinced she was going to become a business mogul. Stella had pointed out a problematic clause in the contract, a detail that, had it been missed, would have cost Jessica her entire commission. She'd been so angry then, so desperate to prove herself. Looking back now, she realized that desperate mindset wouldn't have led to success, only to a spiral of resentment and poor judgment. Here at the restaurant, working with Hannah-chan, she felt more grounded. Hannah was so much more practical. Jessica had always thought of herself as experienced, but she saw now how much she still had to learn. Mr. Liu, too, was incredibly competent, seeming to know something about everything, accounting, law, you name it. If she could become half as capable as him, she'd be set. She was learning that the most important lessons weren't taught in a classroom. A professor gives you knowledge and a way of thinking, but it's up to you to put it into practice. So Jessica focused on her work, learning from Hannah and Mr. Liu. The frantic energy in her heart began to settle. The bitterness faded. She was growing up. Leo took a sip of the cocktail Jordan had prepared with the ritualistic fervor of shaman. The first taste was bitter, shockingly so. Then came a wave of sweetness, followed by a sharp sourness, and finally, a lingering heat at the back of his throat. It was like drinking a demon. It was awful. Jordan beamed proudly. I call it the human condition. Sour, sweet, bitter, spicy, all the flavors of life. You have to drink it fast, though. One shot. If you sip it, it's just too bitter. Leo grimaced. Thanks, but I prefer a sweeter life, one with a little less rich experience. Jordan made him another. This one's called Simple Pleasures, he said with a grin. Leo drank it. It was, as promised, very sweet. Pure positive energy. Sean, who grew up on moonshine, couldn't handle the strange concoctions. They were just too weird, and besides, he couldn't work after drinking. He stuck to warm water. As Leo sipped his drink, Jordan leaned in. Hey, you guys know how to tell the difference between a cheetah, a leopard, and a jaguar? Leo thought for a second, then shook his head. A college student's paradox. Always studying, never knowing anything. It's easy, Jordan said, his eyes twinkling. You reach out and touch its nose. If the nose is wet, it's a cheetah. If your hand is gone, it's a leopard. If you're gone, it's a jaguar. He burst out laughing at his own joke. Another useless piece of knowledge, courtesy of TikTok. For some, the night is when the day truly begins. As if they've just woken up. Bars don't start filling up until 10. Perhaps the Earth, in its wisdom, has assigned different sleep schedules to each generation to give itself a moment to breathe. The elderly get drowsy at 7 or 8 in the evening and wake at 3 or 4 in the morning. The young come alive around 6 or 7 p.m. and don't sleep until dawn. Babies sleep and wake whenever they please. Workhorses, however, operate on a different set of rules entirely. In the capital, Dylan Sloan's good-for-nothing friend, Julian Piggy Zhu, had thrown himself a going-away party. Though he hadn't left yet, the construction crew for Dylan's half-finished villa had already arrived in Bridgeport, a vanguard paving the way for his exile. Mr. Liu had spent the day at the ranch dealing with them. He was a little unnerved. The crew and designers had shown up ready for a major project, but the original construction had been halted for a reason. Otherwise, a prime piece of real estate like this, so close to the city, would have been developed by Richard Vance long ago. The crew was a self-contained unit, even setting up their own temporary housing, prefabricated units that went up in a single day. They'd even brought their own building permits. Mr. Liu knew that getting approval for new villa projects was stricter than ever these days, but this property had been grandfathered in. As Mr. Liu handled the handover, he couldn't help but wonder about his little boss. He'd originally been sent by Mr. Vance just to check out Stella's new boyfriend. Now he was thinking of Leo as the boss. This villa project was something even Richard Vance hadn't touched, yet someone had swept in and solved the problem for Leo. Mr. Lou made a note in his little black book. Little boss has high-level connections in the capital. The crew was from D.C., and they were pros, not some fly-by-night operation. The lead designer had rattled on about security features that sounded like something out of a spy movie. Mr. Lou had feigned expertise as he glanced at the blueprints. A security budget of $600,000 for what was currently a half-finished concrete shell. The specs read, military-grade security, thermal imaging tracking plus EMP shielding plus blast-proof construction. It was like using a 6-digit password to protect a 2-digit bank account. That evening, after a long day, the indefatigable Mr. Lou returned to the private kitchen to continue making himself indispensable. In a spare moment in the bathroom, he scrolled through TikTok. A professional assistant like himself didn't just browse for fun. He monitored anything related to the little boss or Mr. Vance, always anticipating needs, creating his own tasks instead of waiting for them. He scrolled past a few videos, then froze. His jaw dropped. A repost from the Associated Press? Reuters? C-SPAN? He wiped his hands on his pants, then thought better of it and quickly washed them. After drying his fingers, he looked again. Without a second thought, he forwarded the links to Richard Vance with a message. Mr. Vance, you need to lock this down. If you let a son-in-law like this get away, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. Major news outlets don't just casually repost a random TikTok. There are no coincidences at that level. It was confirmation. Mr. Lou added another note to his book, Connections Confirmed. Very high level. Suddenly, the hyper-professional construction crew, with their own permits, didn't seem so strange at all. Meanwhile, the third-generation screw-up, Piggy Zhu, was still trying to weasel his way out of his sentence. A working vacation? In some second-rate city? At a restaurant in a third-rate university? What had he even done to deserve this? He whined and pleaded with his mother, his usual tactic. It seemed to be working. She was softening. All it would take was a little pillow talk from her to his father, a little more stalling from him, and he'd be off the hook. But at dinner that night, his uncle, the true head of the family, unexpectedly praised Dylan Sloan. Your friend Dylan has really matured, his uncle said, his voice carrying weight. He's become quite composed. I saw him at the Research Institute today with a lovely young woman. You two used to get into all sorts of trouble together, but he's grown up. You're still just fooling around. Your brother has arranged a good opportunity for you. Go and listen to what you're told. His parents didn't dare say a word. In his uncle's presence, they were just the younger siblings. Piggy sat meekly, sneaking a look at his phone. The group chat was buzzing about Dylan, about how the TikTok account he'd appeared in had been reposted by official news sources. Suddenly, he was a model citizen. Someone even messaged Piggy directly. Hey man, where are you going to study? You need an assistant? I can do anything. Just yesterday, they've been mocking him for being exiled. Now, they were begging to come along. Unbelievable. Seeing the flood of reposts from authoritative media, even Piggy's doting mother changed her tune. Your brother is doing this for your own good. You should go. He must have seen this coming. You've dragged your feet long enough. If you don't go now, you might not get the chance later. This isn't about followers anymore. When you get this kind of attention, things change. That evening, on the national news, a 30-minute broadcast that had run like clockwork since 1982. The first 10 minutes were dedicated to national politics. The second 10 to domestic affairs. The final 10 to international news. At the 7-minute, 32-second mark, during a segment on a new exhibit in a government hall, the camera panned across the room. It lingered for 8 seconds, with a 3-second close-up on a single painting. The portrait of an old general. He looked ancient, yet there was a fierce tenderness in his eyes, a tiger smelling a rose. For those 3 seconds, as the anchor's calm voice continued its narration, the painting burned itself into the viewer's minds. It was so lifelike it felt as though the general was looking right back at you, making eye contact through the screen. 3 seconds, long enough for a careful observer to pause, zoom in, and see the artist's signature in the bottom corner. As Leo sat at the bar, Chef Wu brought out a small dish of freshly roasted peanuts. Just made these for prep, he said. They're good with a drink. Thanks, chef. Leo popped a few into his mouth and chewed. The rich, nutty aroma filled his senses. He remembered reading somewhere that if you needed to freshen your breath before a kiss and didn't have a toothbrush, chewing a few peanuts would do the trick. A useful tip, unless the person you were about to kiss was allergic. Chef Wu returned to the kitchen, and Leo enjoyed the simple snack. The best parts of any dish were often the prep ingredients, like the perfectly scrambled eggs you'd sneak from the bowl before they went into the fried rice. The restaurant's projector, a relic from the previous owner's sports bar days, was sometimes on in the afternoon. Leo, sipping one of Jordan's creations, casually snapped a photo of him showing off his bartending skills. "Dude," Jordan yelped when he saw it. "Send me that. I need a new profile pic." It was a genuinely good photo. Leo had captured the atmosphere perfectly, and more importantly, he caught the focused, serious expression on Jordan's face. Jordan had good features, varied though they were. His relaxed, confident energy made him a joy to be around, but it was hard to capture in a picture, which usually just highlighted his double chin or puffy eyes. This photo, however, was different. Leo had caught the perfect angle at the perfect moment. The bar hid his belly, his arms were positioned just so, and the slight turn of his head made him look 30 pounds lighter, all without a single filter. It was still him, just the best version of him. Beauty filters were a crutch for lazy photography. Leo's skill was becoming second nature. He no longer had to make small talk to get a candid shot. He just lifted his phone, and it was done. "Bro, you just wait," Jordan said, already texting furiously. "I'm gonna have my brother send over his Hasselblad. It's totally wasted on him." Jordan's older brother had taken his advice about advertising with the show. After seeing his slacker little brother suddenly earn a national scholarship, an event so improbable it bordered on miraculous, he'd figured anything was possible. He'd paid a premium to secure an early ad spot, a move that now looked brilliant. Anyone trying to get in on the action now was facing double the price for a worse time slot. The brother saw the photo Jordan posted in the family group chat and felt a pang of envy. College looked way more fun for his little brother, who was apparently spending his evenings bartending, and with the family's blessing, no less. He'd been hearing about this restaurant from business partners, one of whom had raved about an exclusive private kitchen in Bridgeport that was impossible to get into. Only then did he realize it was at his brother's university, where the little freeloader was supposedly interning. The photo showed his brother looking surprisingly handsome, living his best life. But something felt off. Sure enough, a few minutes after posting in the group, Jordan sent him a private message asking for the camera. "Jordan, bro, you never use it anyway. Said you're going to shoot product photos, but never did. You told me I could have it, remember? I want to give it to Leo." The older brother sighed. "Jordan, groundhog screaming GIF bro, I'm learning to mix drinks at Leo's place and I've been experimenting with some of his good stuff. I looked it up, and some of those bottles are pretty expensive. They were leftover bottles from the previous owner, about to expire." Older brother: "I'll have Charles bring it to you. Anything else?" Jordan: "A Ferrari." Older brother: "Piss off, no. He told Charles, the family driver, to take the camera to his brother, along with a few pairs of the limited edition sneakers his company had just released. The Hasselblad had cost over $10,000. He hadn't known what to buy, so he just asked for the best. In the end, he was a workhorse, not a creative like his brother. The sneakers, though, were his own creation, a successful collaboration that was now being resold for nearly double the retail price. Funnily enough, the inspiration for the design had come from his good-for-nothing little brother. Leo patiently walked Chef Wu through every step of making the steamed fish, starting with dispatching it. The restaurant sourced its fish from a local mountain reservoir, and the daily catch was always inconsistent. To handle the live fish, the kitchen was equipped with a small, filtered tank, a surprisingly thoughtful feature left by the previous owner. Leo demonstrated the process. Chef Wu, despite having made steamed fish countless times, set aside his old habits and watched with the focus of a student. It's always easier to teach someone with a clean slate. Trying to retrain someone is like renovating a house that's already been decorated. You have to tear down the old walls before you can build anything new. Chef Wu had tasted Leo's fish. He knew it was the main draw for their customers. With a humble mindset, he was ready to learn from scratch. "You have to be fast," Leo explained, just as he would for one of Sean's videos. "Clean it immediately. The blood and the black membrane inside the cavity are the main sources of the fishy taste. Make sure there's no clotted blood along the spine, and the gills have to be completely removed. For freshwater fish, you also need to remove the bloodline. Make a small cut near the head on both sides, find the white line, and pull it out while patting the fish's body." He continued, "After you clean it, don't steam it right away. A fish goes through rigor mortis, just like any other animal. If you cook it then, the meat will be tough. That's why sometimes a fish you prepare yourself tastes tougher than one from the market. The market fish has had time to rest and relax. To get the best texture and freshness, let it rest for about 30 minutes. This also helps dry the skin, so it won't break during steaming. Steam over boiling water, high heat, full steam, Chef Wu chimed in, a small point of pride. He knew the basics, like using ginger and scallions or marinating with wine. For a 1-pound fish, about 10 minutes on high heat. Then turn off the heat and let it rest in the steam for another 2 minutes. Chef Wu watched intently as the fish cooked, fanning Leo with a small hand fan to ward off the kitchen's heat. Leo, a bit embarrassed by the overly attentive gesture, politely declined. The truth was, Chef Wu was a large man, and his personal aroma was a bit potent for Leo's sensitive nose. The chef's eyes were glued to the pot, watching the steam rise, convinced that this time he would get it right. He recalled what some students had said about their lab experiments. If the protocol said to bow 3 times to the left before starting, you bowed 3 times. There was always a scientific reason, even if it wasn't obvious. He had followed Leo's instructions to the letter, even mimicking his relaxed stance, his feet slightly apart. When the fish was finally done and drizzled with hot oil, Chef Wu's forehead was beaded with sweat. He nervously took a bite from the tail. It was sublime, fresh, sweet, and unbelievably tender. His eyes crinkled in delight. He prided himself on his sensitive palate, avoiding strong tea just to preserve it. This was it. It wasn't quite at Leo's level. Leo's fish had an almost transcendent quality that made you feel a sense of profound joy, but it was close. It was as good as Leo's had been when he first started. Chef Wu felt he had finally grasped something essential. If he could consistently produce this quality, he could make a name for himself anywhere. Culinary skill was something you either had or you didn't. You couldn't fake it. But he wasn't about to get ahead of himself. This was just one dish. He immediately went to find Mr. Liu. I'd like to renew my contract, Chef Wu said, looking earnest and humble. For 20 years. I'll work for the boss for 20 years. My salary can just be the market rate. Mr. Liu was floored. He couldn't believe this big, burly guy was so cunning, trying to lock in a 20-year contract right now. Had he gotten some inside information? The boss taught me his skills without holding anything back, Chef Wu explained. In the old days, a disciple was like a son to his master. I'm too old to say I'll take care of the boss in his old age. I'll probably die before him, so I'll just follow the business rules. I learned his craft, so I'll work for him. What a brilliant excuse, Mr. Liu thought. He reported the conversation to Leo. Leo considered it. If he had indeed shared some of his culinary buff with Chef Wu, then Wu's skills would only improve. A standard market rate salary, even at the top end, wouldn't be fair. He thought of how Joy Run had given him a stake in the tea business, inspiring him to work even harder. It was a model for a healthy, long-term partnership. He didn't know the specifics, so he left it to the professional. Mr. Liu, he said, can you draw up a contract for Chef Wu? Let's do a fixed salary plus a share of the profits. It was early morning when Leo opened his dorm room door and was startled by a figure hanging in the dimly lit hallway. Before senior year, the corridors were always festooned with laundry, but now, with fewer students around, the sight was jarring. A faint breeze made the shape sway. For a heart-stopping moment, it looked like a headless body. On closer inspection, it was just a jumpsuit. It belonged to Jordan, an expensive piece from some trendy brand that, on him, looked like something a lumberjack would wear to a prison rodeo. If Jordan ever posted a picture of himself in it for a product review, the company would probably issue a full refund and beg him to take it down. The model in the ad looked like a suave, rugged celebrity. Jordan looked like an actual convict. Jordan had a peculiar fondness for aggressively ugly clothes, a trait that served as a useful, if unintentional, quality control for his family's fashion business. It was a passion he shared with Alex's cousin, Ryan Hahn, who also had a penchant for garish designer wear. The two had hit it off and stayed in touch. Ryan, inspired by Sean, had even started his own TikTok channel documenting his life as a trust fund kid with a menial job at an ad agency. Sean's advice was to be authentic, so Ryan filmed his reality, living in a massive Georgetown townhouse, driving a G-Wagon, and earning a pittance at a job where he was often forgotten in meeting invitations. His videos, a quirky blend of rich kid problems and entry-level grunt work, had slowly started to gain traction. He'd amassed over 10,000 followers and was thrilled. It was the first time any of his creative endeavors had gotten any feedback at all. Sean, ever the straight shooter, answered all of Ryan's questions about filming and editing, but drew the line at promoting his channel on their own account. The account wasn't just his, and he wouldn't make that decision unilaterally. This morning, Leo was up first. He got dressed, slipping on a new pair of sneakers Jordan's brother had sent over. They were surprisingly comfortable, with soft, cushioned soles and a subtle lift inside. The logo on the heel looked vaguely like a poop emoji, which he guessed was the source of their legendary comfort. Sean had to be woken up. The flood of attention from the official media outlets had left him jittery, and he'd had trouble falling asleep. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest, a sensation that worried him. Heart disease was common back home, a consequence of living at high altitude. The driving school had offered to send a shuttle, a beat-up minibus that would be making multiple stops. Leo declined, saying they'd get there themselves. Moments later, Mr. Lou pulled up in a Bentley Bentayga. The irony wasn't lost on Leo. He used to resent the kids in fancy cars. Now, the Dragon Slayer had become the dragon, or at least a dragon in training. Still feeling a little self-conscious, he asked Mr. Lou to drop them at the edge of the student strip. A short walk would have to substitute for his morning run. As they walked, they ran into Professor Reed, who was out for her morning constitutional. "Off to the driving test, are we?" she called out, spotting them. Leo nodded. "Wish us luck." "Oh, you won't need it," she said with a wave of her hand. "It's a piece of cake. I didn't get my license until after I retired. 62, I was. Passed everything on the first go. You'll be fine." She paused, then her eyes lit up. "And, once you're licensed, I think I can bump up your pay for the assistant job. Maybe another $20 a day." Leo blinked. He'd completely forgotten he was still technically on her payroll. It felt like another lifetime. After saying their goodbyes and receiving Professor Reed's blessing for the test, they continued on. Mr. Lou had thoughtfully prepared breakfast. "Have you ever eaten in a Bentley?" Leo hadn't, until today. They ate breakfast burritos and drank smoothies from thick paper straws. The warm, hearty meal was deeply satisfying. Mr. Lou was thrilled to be playing chauffeur. Driving might be a low-skilled job, but the driver was often the boss's most trusted confidant. In the private, insulated space of a car, people talked. To be asked to drive was a sign of trust. At Mr. Vance's company, there were dozens of sharp, highly educated assistants. Here, with the little boss, he had a chance to be the first. That thought had been slowly solidifying in his mind, and after seeing the official media reposts and Chef Wu signing a 20-year contract, it had crystallized into a firm goal. If a chef could get a stake in the business, what could a loyal, proactive assistant achieve? He was here at the beginning. Driven by this new ambition, Mr. Lou's service was impeccable. Hearing that Leo had his test, he'd offered a ride, bought breakfast, and stocked the car with wet wipes, drinks, and mouthwash. He was the perfect assistant. If you say something with enough conviction, people will rarely question you. They might feel a flicker of doubt, but they're more likely to question their own judgment than your unwavering confidence. This was the state Julian Piggy Zhu found himself in. Hannah Chun drove with a steady hand, navigating the chaotic airport traffic before turning onto a series of smaller, less traveled roads. Soon, they were on a narrow country lane winding through the mountains, a path so tight that passing a motorcycle felt like a near miss. The road was flanked by dense forest and the occasional cow. There were no houses in sight. Piggy, who had lived a life cocooned in goodwill, had started the ride feeling relaxed. He'd never encountered a truly bad person, but as the car delved deeper into the wilderness, a primal unease began to prickle at him. The way she called his name at the airport had sent a strange chill down his spine, and now, surrounded by trees, that feeling intensified. He suddenly felt like a pig being led to slaughter. Was this a setup? Was he about to be parted from his organs? The windows were rolled up tight, the doors locked. The car was warm and stuffy. Outside, the world grew more remote. He couldn't jump out. She was driving too fast, the car bucking over the rough road like a plane in turbulence. Seeing she wasn't paying attention, he furtively texted Dylan Sloan. "Piggy, dude, I'm being kidnapped. This big girl who picked me up drove me into mountains. Call the cops for me. I'm scared she'll see me." Dylan had spent the previous evening on a date with his ex, Holly Lynn. A date that, for some inexplicable reason, had ended at a bookstore, where she had promptly unpacked her laptop and started working. He had taken her to a luxury mall, where he was a VVP, and she had spent the entire evening writing a paper, sipping from a thermos she'd brought from home. Her bag, he discovered, contained not just a laptop, but a laptop stand, an external keyboard, a mouse, headphones, a massive notebook, and a fountain pen. He had slept on a display sofa until the staff woke them at closing time. It was the healthiest, most boring date of his life. He'd woken up before noon and was just scrolling his phone when Piggy's panicked text arrived. He burst out laughing. "Dylan, moron. If it were a real kidnapping, you'd be dead already. Is this the driver?" He sent a group photo Sean had taken, which included Hannah. "Piggy, yeah, that's her." Dylan howled with laughter. "Dylan, she's the restaurant manager. Senior this year. Her family's business is a butchery. Generations of pig butchers. Maybe it's a bloodline thing. You feel a primal fear. LMAO. Piggy, Just then, the car rounded a bend, and a small village came into view. Dogs barked. A few cars and pickup trucks were parked along the road. It looked normal. Piggy finally let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "Is the road to the university always this remote?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "Oh, you could take the highway," Hannah said cheerfully, "but it's longer and costs $6 in tolls. A local showed me this shortcut. It's actually 3 minutes faster. We'll make it back in time for lunch." Piggy stared at her. What an incredibly practical reason. He remembered Dylan's text and, against his better judgment, asked, "So what does your family do?" Hannah, a talkative person, was happy to chat. "My great-great-grandfather was an executioner," she said with a bright smile. "He decided killing people was bad karma, so my great-grandfather switched to being a butcher. My grandpa was a butcher, and so are my dad and my uncle. My uncle's the best pig butcher in 3 counties. My dad's not as skilled, so he specializes in gelding. He's a professional castrator. Pigs, donkeys, horses, cats, dogs, you name it. The skill is usually passed down to the sons, but I'm the only kid in my generation, so they taught me everything." Piggy, who had previously only felt a chill down his spine, now felt an icy dread pool in his groin. Hiss! The car passed a field where a lone bull was grazing on new shoots of grass. "That one's been fixed," Hannah noted, glancing out the window. "He's got a calm temperament, probably raised for beef. The marbling is better in steers. Slower growth rate, though. You have to feed them more." Piggy unconsciously clenched his thighs. "How can you tell?" "Intuition," she said. "I've been watching my dad work since I was a little girl. After you've seen a few hundred castrations, you just develop a feel for it." Piggy squeezed his legs tighter and stared out the window. Trees, hills, another turn, more trees, buildings, a lake. "You can just call me Piggy," he said weakly. "Hannah, we're almost there, right?" "Yup," she said, expertly steering around a corner. "Just over that bridge, and we're on campus." Piggy breathed a sigh of relief. "Your school is beautiful. So many people. This is great. Really great." Hannah dropped Piggy off at the restaurant. Leo and Sean weren't back yet. She gave him a quick tour of the place and the dorms. On the way, Piggy mentioned his family was in the construction business. "General contractor?" Hannah asked. Yeah, exactly." Piggy nodded eagerly. He quickly spun a new identity for himself. A humble boy from a remote part of the state, from a family of contractors who all lived together in a big, rural compound. He was usually proud of his background, but after his brief flirtation with mortal terror on a mountain road, he decided it was best to lay low. Hannah led him to the dorm. Piggy stared confused. He planned on staying at a hotel. "You're here to work at the restaurant, and you want to stay in a hotel?" Hannah asked, bewildered. She told him the best option nearby was a Hilton Garden Inn. "What's a garden inn?" Piggy asked. "Don't you have any proper 5-star hotels?" Hannah looked to the heavens for strength. She couldn't deal with this kid. She handed him off to Jordan. "Jordan, this is Piggy, a friend of Dylan's. He's here to intern. The boss said to take good care of him." Jordan took one look at the newcomer and recognized his own kind, a child of privilege with zero ambition and a deep-seated aversion to hard work. "Come on, Piggy, my man," Jordan said, clapping him on the shoulder. "I've got the perfect job for you." By the time Leo and Sean got back, lunch was ready. Chef Wu had been waiting for the boss to arrive before serving the final dishes. Leo greeted Piggy. Dylan had told him his degenerate friend was coming and to make sure he worked hard. Leo didn't pry into his background. Sometimes it was better not to know. He was here to intern, so he would be treated like an intern. Leo had to work, his roommates worked, so Piggy would work too. Piggy, for his part, was a little disappointed. He'd expected the legendary Leo Foster to recognize his status, to treat him differently. But Leo was friendly and treated him just like everyone else. It was a blow to his ego, but also, strangely, a relief. It felt normal. Lunch was Chef Wu's creation. He'd gone to the market that morning, selected the best fish, and prepared it with the utmost care. Leo took a bite. It was excellent. It was nice to be able to enjoy a good meal without having to cook it himself. Everyone praised the chef, saying he'd truly mastered the dish. "I still have room for improvement," Chef Wu said humbly. "I need to keep learning from the boss." Piggy, who was starving, dug in. Dylan hadn't been exaggerating. The food was incredible, especially the fish. He was a picky eater, but he found himself enjoying every bite. He'd stay, he decided. The food alone was worth it. But then he overheard the others saying that Leo's cooking was even better. Could it really get better than this? After lunch, Jordan took Piggy under his wing to teach him the arts of coffee and cocktails. Finally, someone else to help waste the expensive ingredients. Leo went for his customary nap. Sean, exhausted from the previous night, dozed off in a chair in the main dining room. The heating kept the room warm. When Hannah passed by, she gently draped a spare blanket over him. Leo slept soundly, his mind filled with a jumble of dreams. He woke up feeling a bit groggy, a sign that he'd been eating more and exercising less lately. Downstairs, he found Alex had returned and was deep in conversation with Piggy, looking like long-lost brothers. The restaurant was peaceful. Sean was asleep under a blanket. Jordan was quietly making coffee. It was a harmonious scene. Leo watched them, a strange sense of gratitude washing over him. He used to think he was naive, but seeing how easily Alex could charm someone, he was thankful for the 4 years of exposure. It had raised his threshold for bullshit. It would take a very skilled con artist to fool him now. The afternoon crowd started to trickle in, mostly students coming for a coffee or tea. Dinner reservations were harder to come by. The prices were a bit steep for a student budget, and the restaurant was booked solid at least a week in advance. The key to a successful restaurant is simple: good food. If the food is exceptional, people will eat it sitting on a curb next to a sewer drain. If the food is good, the service is pleasant, and the atmosphere is comfortable, you have a Michelin star contender. Leo, feeling refreshed after his nap, decided to make himself a milk tea. It was a good chance to test the progress of his advanced culinary skill. He started by meticulously cleaning his workspace, a habit learned from watching the Japanese tea masters. Then, he began the process. Full-fat milk was essential. Skim milk was an abomination. The ideal ratio was 1 part tea to 1. 2 parts milk. He brewed the tea carefully. Too hot and it becomes bitter, too short and it lacks aroma. A simple trick for beginners was to steep it, which resulted in a mellow, slightly sweet brew. He made a simple syrup from sugar and water, which would dissolve perfectly without sinking to the bottom. The final, crucial step was to warm the mug before pouring in the tea, locking in the flavor. He savored the ritual. When it was done, he tasted it. It was perfect. The silky, warm liquid coated his tongue, a perfect balance of sweet, creamy, and rich. It felt like a hug in a mug, a moment of quiet bliss. He made a small batch, giving a cup to everyone there and offering a complimentary taste to the afternoon customers. Alex, who had been deep in conversation with Piggy about his favorite race cars, paused mid-sentence, a look of serene bliss on his face as he sipped the tea. Piggy, who usually disdained such girly drinks in favor of alcohol, was a bit hesitant, but it was made by Leo himself with such obvious care. He took a sip, then another, and another. He drained the small cup in 3 gulps. "Can I have another?" he asked, amazed. He finally understood why people queued for hours for bubble tea. The drink was addictive. It was more than just a taste. It was a mood. A wave of pure happiness washed over him, a feeling as exhilarating as winning a race in a Ferrari. A mechanical voice sounded in Leo's head. Host has created a milk tea with extraordinary care, achieving a specialist level 5 quality. The host and those who drank it experienced a deep sense of earnest joy. As a reward, the host will share one of the drinker's skills: intermediate race car, driving proficiency, level 3. In the amateur circuit, you're now a king. Leo glanced at Piggy with new curiosity. The kid wasn't just bragging about racing then. He was the real deal. His phone buzzed. It was a message from the driving school. His final road test was scheduled for tomorrow. If he passed, he could get his license on the spot. After his afternoon tea, Leo headed to the backyard to brew his herbal medicine. He planned to go to the horse ranch tomorrow after the test. The afternoon passed quickly. As evening fell, the dinner guests began to arrive. Stella came later, not to work, but as a customer. She was treating her French and Spanish tutor to a farewell dinner before he returned home. Leo was in the kitchen, and Chef Wu, looking as energized and devoted as a new convert, worked alongside him, ready to dedicate his life to the great culinary arts. The 2 exchange professors were heartbroken to leave. The dinner had been that good. It's a misconception that foreigners can't handle authentic Chinese food. In reality, high-end Chinese cuisine abroad is often prohibitively expensive, far beyond the reach of the average person. But a good meal is a universal language. The 2 professors felt they'd just had the most exquisite meal since arriving in the country. On top of that, they'd received beautiful, expensive gifts from their generous students: a fan made of fragrant agarwood, a handbag crafted from vintage embroidered silk, and a set of gemstone cufflinks and a matching brooch. Stella, in particular, had taken a liking to the couple. They were so romantic, and their dynamic as a married pair was special. They respected each other, shared common interests, and embodied the art of compromise. They were outwardly affectionate, seemingly madly in love, in that very American way, where some couples seem so fused together that if one partner were to leave, the other would need to find a replacement immediately, and then be just as madly in love all over again. What Stella hadn't expected was to run into someone connected to her mother, Victoria Vance. Apparently, the young man now working part-time at Leo's restaurant was an old acquaintance, someone she'd met as a child. They barely remembered each other and hadn't been in contact since, but it was just another reminder of how small the world was. 6 degrees of separation, indeed. Her father, Richard Vance, was a brilliant businessman, decisive and sharp. But there were plenty of smart people in the world. He had reached his current heights, in no small part, because he'd been looked after. He had, in essence, inherited the invisible resources of Victoria's family. On the surface, it was a classic CEO romance novel, but there were always other factors at play. Life rarely needed to be spelled out so clearly. Some things were better left hazy. It helped explain how a man as wealthy and capable as Richard Vance remained so devoted. He had no other women on the side, and despite his wife's often dramatic behavior, he doted on her, speaking only of her virtues in public. They had only one daughter, with no illegitimate children from secret affairs. Was it all just love? Love was part of it, certainly, but there were other factors, too. That evening, Richard Vance was at home. If he didn't have a business dinner, he always came home on time. He was looking over some work when he received a resignation notice from Mr. Liu, his assistant. He'd invested a fortune in training the man, giving him generous perks and benefits, all under one condition: loyalty. If he ever wanted to leave, he had to give ample notice. Otherwise, Richard would make him spit out everything he'd ever been given. He wasn't against his people moving on. If they could climb to a higher position, he was happy to give them a boost. An old assistant of his had passed the civil service exam and gotten a top job at the IRS, and Richard had thrown him a lavish farewell party, arranging everything. But Mr. Liu, the man he'd just assigned to a special project, wanted to switch masters? To go work for that kid? It was bad enough that his own daughter was captivated by the young upstart. But now his assistant, too? Richard almost laughed out loud from sheer frustration. He'd just polished off several bowls of rice with a fiery chili sauce. His stomach was full, but the anger still simmered. He'd even seen the official state media post about Leo, that Mr. Liu had forwarded. The unfairness of it all was galling. He donated far more than that kid ever had. When you have hundreds of millions in the bank, your social responsibility grows, and charitable contributions become a necessity. But no one reported on his donations. The state media didn't just ignore him. They didn't even mention him. Of course, he preferred it that way. He'd be hounded for money otherwise. He liked to keep a low profile. Still, he envied the kid. Doing the same thing at 21 versus 35 had a completely different impact. For Leo to achieve at his age what Richard had only managed in his mid-30s. The value was on a different scale entirely. He trained his assistants to be exceptional, either specialists in one area or incredibly well-rounded. He was genuinely curious. Why would Mr. Liu choose the kid? The pay couldn't possibly be as good. Did he really think working for Leo offered a better future than working for him? The thought left Richard torn between anger and a strange sense of pride in his daughter's judgment. Despite his irritation, Richard believed in amicable partings. And who knew what the future held? He was bold and generous with his employees. He replied to Mr. Liu, "No rush. Get settled in with your new boss first. Your salary and benefits here will continue until you're ready to make the transition official." With Richard Vance's approval, Mr. Liu waited until the evening rush at the restaurant had subsided before approaching his new prospective boss. When Mr. Liu explained he was there to interview for the position of his assistant, Leo was stunned. Do I have future billionaire written on my forehead or something? He wondered. Probably not. He reasoned it was all the external validation. The official media reposts were a massive boost. He'd even gotten a message from Connor Brighton in D.C. after the news broke. Back home, people had called him an idiot for his donation, but after the official endorsement, the narrative had completely flipped. Now they were calling him brilliant, a strategic thinker, and so on. Or maybe Leo thought, I have some kind of mysterious background buff that's misleading him. He tried to set the record straight, speaking with earnest sincerity. My family is just normal. My parents are working-class people in a small fourth-tier city. Mr. Liu nodded. I know. I passed the bar exam. I have friends in the legal system. It's not hard to look someone up, especially a college student whose records are all public. But for someone with no background to have the assets and resources you do today, isn't that even more impressive? That's the real deal. Mr. Liu had done his homework. He knew about the condo in Georgetown, D.C. Over 2,000 square feet in a prime location. Even in a cooler housing market, that property was easily worth over $10 million, not including the antiques inside. Then, there was the house in Clearwater Cove, the horse ranch, the new villa under construction, the restaurant building itself, and of course Monarch, the prize horse. All told, his assets in Bridgeport were easily in the eight-figure range as well. The land the ranch was on was incredibly valuable. As night fell, people settled in. Some watched TV, others scrolled through videos. They weren't together, but a surprising number of them were watching the same thing. The TV viewers felt a renewed appreciation for networks like HBO. They didn't bother with the garbage that cluttered streaming services. They aired classic, quality productions. This new series was one of them. From the first episode, you could tell it was different. The story was clear and compelling, without trying to be overly mysterious. Every plot point felt earned and logical. The casting was perfect, with nothing that felt anachronistic or out of place. It was just good, solid television. It felt like there were more shows than ever, yet fewer good ones and no new classics. Sometimes it was better to just re-watch the old stuff. Tonight's episode featured Silas, the team master. On the surface, he was harmless, the kind of man who wouldn't even sweat a mosquito. But he was revealed to be a villain, and a chillingly effective one. Given that his entire family had been executed, his quest for revenge was brutally logical. This wasn't a story where the protagonist falls in love with the person who destroyed their life and inexplicably forgives them. In a scene that unfolded with terrifying calm, Silas murdered a man while making casual conversation. He slid a dagger into the man's stomach, twisted it to ensure the wound was fatal, then slowly withdrew the blade, wiping the blood clean on the victim's own clothes. Silas's expression wasn't blank, nor was it a caricature of grimacing evil. There was no remorse, no vomiting in disgust. He simply seemed distracted, his mind replaying the moment his father and brothers died before his eyes. His skill with tea was legendary, earning him the title of the greatest tea master of his generation. Royals, nobles, and scholars all considered it an honor to drink his tea. When he prepared it, he was transcendent, like a celestial being emerging from a misty forest, his eyelashes still dotted with dew. You could almost smell the fragrant steam through the screen. There was no need for a narrator to explain how good the tea was. The actors drinking it sold the experience completely. Their subtle expressions of awe, the way their backs unconsciously straightened, it was a masterclass in performance. Silas's own movements were like flowing water, elegant and unforced. And then there was the casual, compassionate cruelty of his killing, the innocent look on his face as his mind drifted elsewhere. That, too, felt terrifyingly real. The show explained that after escaping, Silas had hidden in the deep mountains, practicing his swordsmanship by hunting, one life taken each day, and balancing the killing intent by brewing tea, one pot brewed each day. It was a plausible explanation for his proficiency in both, but still, damn, it was unsettling. You might want to run a background check on that guy. From his first appearance to tonight's murder, Silas's character had been fully realized. At first, most people were just fans of his looks, clean, youthful, and sunny, with a friendly smile that wasn't effeminate. He had the gentle air of a nobleman. But after tonight, the excitement was electric. It was the kind of thrill that made your toes curl. Viewers who paid for early access on HBO Max were losing their minds. It was a bloodbath, and it was glorious. There was no turning the other cheek, no moralizing about the villain's tragic backstory. Director Hayes' values were perfectly aligned with a modern audience. Her story was one of righteous vengeance, governed by its own strict logic and rules. It was a stark contrast to director Ian Shaw's Storm and Cloud. His show was supposedly for a younger audience, but it threw logic to the wind for cheap thrills, all while relying on the same tired old tropes, swapped-at-birth storylines, secret love children, class-cross lovers, and even a general falling for the Empress. After episodes of relentless misery, the show had the audacity to end with a happy finale, with everyone cheerfully making barbecue together, as if the trauma never happened. Director Hayes really owed director Shaw a thank you. His loud, obnoxious smear campaign had been the best kind of marketing. All it took was a direct comparison to highlight her quality. She felt she was just doing her job, but next to Shaw's work, it was like an A student sitting next to a failing one. Even if the A student couldn't solve the extra credit problem, they still looked like a genius in comparison. Her show had no unhinged characters. Everyone acted according to their motivations, which was why Silas's appearance was so electrifying. The scene cut from the murder back to him, serenely preparing tea for the royal court. The nobles sipped and praised, oblivious to the darker stain on the hem of his black robe. The air was filled with the elegant aroma of tea, a scene of peaceful, prosperous society. As they drank, the noble prince he'd just stabbed collapsed, choking on his last breath. And as they quoted classics and composed poems in praise of the tea, a man died. In the grand scheme of the show, Silas was just a villain pushing the plot forward. The protagonist, a brilliant political strategist, was aware of a shadowy foe but couldn't identify him. They never exchanged a single word. Yet through some unspoken understanding, they ended up working in tandem several times. Silas knew of him, but the hero didn't know Silas. And in the end, the hero married Silas's former fiancée, the show's heroine. According to the old customs, they had never met. It was an arranged betrothal, almost a childhood engagement. Silas had only ever thought of her as family. When his family was destroyed and he was exiled, she had chased after him, frantically pressing travel money into his hands. That was the first time he had ever seen her. Later, after his entire family was dead, she became the only person he cared about, the only one who could stir a flicker of softness in him. He had used her money to give them a proper burial. So many of them. The Chancellor's Gambit was a historical political drama. It was about how young men rose through the ranks through civil service exams, how they navigated the treacherous court, and how they carved out a place for themselves. Romance was a minor subplot. Tonight was the villain's night to shine. Watching him kill and kill and kill, while remaining as gentle and refined as a cup of fine tea. It was profoundly satisfying. You knew he was the bad guy, but you couldn't hate him. He was like Cersei Lannister in Game of Thrones, a villain so vibrant and memorable you couldn't help but be captivated. Bad guys should act like bad guys. When you're young, you always root for the hero. But now, if you put yourself in the villain's shoes, you realize just how cathartic it was. 10 years of suffering and hiding wasn't for the sake of more suffering. It was for vengeance. After killing, one must wash their hands. Before brewing tea, one must wash their hands. He was, after all, just a tea master who loved his craft. Was the tea good? Yes. It was exquisite. Later that evening, Julian Piggy Zhu asked Leo for a photo to send to his family. Your brother-in-law? Leo asked, confused. Piggy, ever the opportunist, had decided that since he was friends with Stella, Leo was practically family. He'd started calling him bro-in-law. For all their failings, the third-generation rich kids were quick on their feet in some ways. Since he'd already been given the title, Leo could hardly refuse. He had Sean snap a photo of them. After being treated to his new bro-in-law's personally made milk tea, steamed fish, chili sauce, culinary tonic, and sponge cake, Piggy decided he was never leaving. He'd fight anyone who tried to make him. He happily posted the photo to his Instagram. Working for my boy Leo from now on. Stoked. In the picture, Piggy's slightly rounder frame made Leo look even more refined and handsome. It was the spitting image of a young master and his loyal page boy. Though in reality, Piggy was the young master, and Leo was the protagonist in disguise. The post immediately blew up. Friends he hadn't heard from in years started messaging him, freaking out. Is that Silas? OMG, OMG, Even the notoriously difficult debutantes from his social circle were sliding into his DMs, asking for details. Later, Mr. Liu arranged for Piggy's accommodations. The employee dorms were too Spartan, so he rented a fully furnished one-bedroom apartment on the student strip. It couldn't compare to a five-star hotel, but the view of the campus, nestled against the mountains and overlooking the lake, was beautiful. It was safe, convenient, and thoughtfully decorated. After a long day of travel and an immediate start to his new job, Piggy showered and collapsed in a bed. The distant, drunken howls of college students became a surprisingly comforting lullaby, and he slept soundly. Leo and Sean walked the girls back to their dorm. Since Jessica was out of town, Leo saw Stella to the main entrance. Sean tagged along to walk with Hannah-chun. He was usually quiet, but around Hannah, he was practically mute, his words catching in his throat. To avoid being a third wheel, he walked beside her. Sean summoned 100 times his normal courage and managed to force out a single, coherent sentence. Thanks for the blanket this afternoon. Don't mention it, Hannah replied. It was nothing. And then, silence again. At the dorm entrance, Leo turned to Hannah. I'm entrusting my precious cargo to you. Please see her to her door. Hannah gave a mock salute. Mission received, boss. Stella rolled her eyes. Did falling in love turn people into idiots? Did he think she'd forgotten the way to her own room? And that nickname, my precious cargo. It was so. The darkness hid the blush creeping up her cheeks as she waved goodbye. For new couples, even a single night apart was an event worth a farewell. Once the girls were gone, Sean's tongue loosened. Around familiar people, he wasn't so reserved. Back home, he was the guy in a loud shirt on the motorcycle, his grin so wide you could see every tooth. Leo, now a seasoned veteran of love, could easily see that Sean was crushing on Hannah. He wasn't sure why, but everyone at the shop, following Piggy's lead, had started calling her Hannah with a certain respectful admiration, as if she were their cool older sister. It fit. She had a grounded, capable energy that radiated security. But Leo was no expert on pursuit. He'd always been the one being pursued. Back in the dorm, Alex was still on the phone, and Jordan was deep in a game. Leo showered, and when he came back, Alex was still on the phone, now hashing out the final details for the campus food festival. Leo felt a pang of guilt. The whole thing had started because he hadn't wanted to bluntly refuse the breakfast burrito guy's request for a TikTok video. Now it seemed like he'd sentenced Alex to hard labor. Finally, just before lights out, Alex hung up. He shot Leo a tired glare. "Thanks to you, I'm getting the full workhorse treatment. Sun up to sundown. I'm exhausted. Wanted to give you a massage," Leo offered. Alex waved a dismissive hand. "Hang on, let me change into my pajamas first." Leo sighed. The guy was so particular, treating the dorm room like a high-end spa. He started working on Alex's shoulders with his advanced massage technique. The pressure was intense, pinning Alex to the chair. Just then, the scene from the Chancellor's Gambit came on, the one where Leo's character commits murder. Alex, who had been groaning in pleasure, suddenly felt a wave of goosebumps. With a real-life actor kneading his neck while the on-screen version was a cold-blooded killer, he had the terrifying thought that one wrong move, one sudden twist, and his own head would snap. The acting was too convincing. "You know what, Leo? You're acting weird," Alex stammered. "Maybe we should stop? I feel much better already." Leo himself was curious watching the scene. He didn't even remember filming it like that. The editing was incredible. All those close-ups on his hands, his expression, his eyes. He'd completely forgotten. He ignored Alex's protests, gave his shoulders a few firm smacks, and then seemed to lift and stretch his entire spine. Alex felt like he'd just grown an inch. He stood up, feeling looser, more handsome, like a giant poodle that had just been fluffed. "Leo, what will I ever do without you?" Alex wailed dramatically, mimicking a famous comedian, but the sentiment was genuine. After graduation, he'd never get this treatment again. The only people Leo massaged were big shots. Wait, Alex thought, a grin spreading across his face. Does that make me a big shot? The four roommates fell asleep to the sound of the show. That night, Leo dreamt he was an assassin again, soaring through the air, flying all night. It was exhausting. He woke up to find one leg, completely asleep, pinned under the other. In his dreams, his legs hadn't been for walking, just for launching into flight. He had his final road test today, but thankfully it was scheduled for later in the morning. He went for his run, ate breakfast, and then he and Sean headed out. Mr. Lou was driving again. Feeling the Bentley was too flashy, Leo had asked him to bring the other car. Mr. Lou pulled up in the Rivian. Still, Mr. Lou thought one luxury car was hardly enough for his boss. He'd already sent a list of Leo's preferences to Mr. Vance. At the top of the list was a Rolls-Royce Cullinan. He wondered if Mr. Vance had bought it yet. Maybe he should follow up. Leo saw the red Ferrari waiting for him. The prancing black horse on the golden emblem. Humans truly were kind-hearted creatures, he mused, with a shared love for animals. Women loved Hermes. Men loved Ferrari, both adorned with a horse. Fun fact, you shouldn't drive a Ferrari to a bar. Sure, it looks cool parked out front, and flashing the keys is a major flex. But after a few drinks, you have to call a designated driver. A Ferrari only has 2 seats. The driver takes one, which leaves only one spot for you and the girl you were hoping to impress. The side of the car was surreal. Was his friend from the Middle East really this wealthy? Sending such an extravagant toy without even having met? It was like those rich guys in online group chats who would drop a huge cash gift before saying a word, just to enjoy the collective worship. He'd gotten his license today, and today a Ferrari had appeared. As much as he wanted to take it for a spin, work came first. He asked Mr. Lou to air the car out. Even a Ferrari probably had that new car smell. He'd been in so many new vehicles lately. He imagined life was like a video game, with a health bar that went up or down depending on your activities. Some people had short, shaky health bars, always on the verge of empty. Others were always topped up, regenerating any damage almost instantly. For now, Leo went to see Monarch. The horse was thrilled to see him, nickering happily. Lately, he'd been feeling much better, the chronic pain in his legs subsiding. Anyone with an old injury or arthritis knows the feeling. Some days you wake up and it just hurts for no reason. Doctors tell you to exercise, do some yoga, but nothing really helps. Poor health sours your mood. Monarch's temper had always been partly due to his physical discomfort. He wants to put on a happy face when they're in pain. But the new regimen was working wonders. The pain was gone, and he'd even grown accustomed to the unappetizing medicinal herbs. He felt that every time the little human cub visited, he got better. Monarch was extremely affectionate, nudging his head forward, wanting to lick Leo's face. Leo politely declined. Monarch respected his boundaries, gently bumping his head against the cub's instead. This cub must have lived with the two-leggers for too long, Monarch thought. He looks just like them, so frail. His hearing is probably poor, his night vision even worse. The poor thing. Sean filmed their interaction. He was a little on edge himself. Overnight, his TikTok account, The Roommate Chronicles, had gained another 1 million followers, pushing the total to 11 million. He understood the initial surge from the state media repost, but this? Was it spillover from the Chancellor's gambit? He was still the same person, but the massive audience brought a strange new pressure. He worried that one day he'd post something inappropriate and cause a scandal. It was probably why rich people look back on their broke days with nostalgia. When you're poor, your only goal is to make money. Everything else is a bonus. Now, with so many followers, he felt a responsibility to create better content, terrified of one bad video causing a mass exodus. Monarch was always a guaranteed hit, so he focused on capturing the tender moments between Leo and the horse. After their greeting, Leo led Monarch out for a walk. A stable, no matter how luxurious, was still a cage. A horse belonged in the open. While Sean filmed Mr. Luke diligently inspected the Ferrari. It was a perk of the job. Like a royal food taster, he got to try everything first. He took a deep breath. There was a faint scent of new leather. He opened the windows, placed charcoal bags inside, and made a note to buy a professional air quality monitor. The boss had only mentioned it once, but that was enough to make it a top priority. Riding Monarch, Leo meandered through the woods on the edge of the property, Sean following. They passed the half-finished villa, where construction was now in full swing. A small cluster of temporary buildings housed the crew, and workers in hard hats moved about purposefully. It was like watching a city builder game come to life. Leo didn't disturb them, continuing his ride. He looped around to the back of the ranch, near the workers' quarters, and found a small, neglected vegetable patch. The previous crew had likely planted it, but the new one had let it go wild. Still, some vegetables remained, overgrown and untended. Leo felt a familiar stirring. It was in his blood. He remembered his grandmother's garden, a narrow strip of land behind her apartment building where she grew an impossible amount of food, beans, cabbages, melons, enough to feed them all year. He dismounted, letting Monarch wander with Sean's horse. He easily found a sickle, a hoe, and a watering can nearby. A new idea for Sean's video content. He set to work, the blade of the sickle flashing in the sun as he cut down the overgrown greens. They were tough, but he knew they hadn't been grown with chemical fertilizers. They would be perfect for pickling, possessing a unique sweetness and resilience. He could see the evidence in the random, uneven growth in the small insect holes in the leaves. He felt a deep satisfaction with each swing, watching the old vegetables fall. The mountain wind had a bite to it. As soon as the sun dipped below the horizon, the warmth vanished. Before that, sitting on the grassy slope, you could enjoy the view for a while, the distant mountains, the old chapel at their base, the reservoir shimmering in the light. But once the sun was gone, the wind cut through you like an icy mop. The difference between humans and animals is that when we get cold, we know to go home and play on our smartphones. Leo and Stella headed back down. The road was a proper, paved two-lane path, wide enough for cars to pass. In this coastal city, people held a special reverence for their places of worship. Years ago, when families went out to sea, all they could do was pray for their safe return. So long before every village had a paved road, the path to the chapel was always perfectly maintained. The drive up had been a series of switchbacks and inclines. The drive down was a smooth descent. The Ferrari 812 Superfast was wide, wider than a Mercedes E-Class, even wider than the F12 Berlinetta. Though he'd just gotten his license today, Leo's intermediate-level racing skill kicked in. Driving the Ferrari felt different. On the winding mountain road, he could feel the precise steering and explosive acceleration. The car felt nimble, the brakes sharp and responsive. The drive was over too quickly. In what felt like an instant, they were back at the restaurant. The place was already bustling. 3 parking spots were open out front, soon occupied by the Ferrari, the Bentley, and the Rivian. The Bentley had never drawn much attention, but the Ferrari was a showstopper. People were stopping on the sidewalk to take pictures. It was outrageously flashy, its design almost sci-fi. Seeing a Ferrari in a city this size was rare. Seeing one parked next to a Bentley was an event. A little part of Leo was doing a happy dance inside, though he kept his expression cool, a trick he picked up from Alex. Alex could maintain a poker face if a mountain collapsed in front of him. The only thing that could rattle him was probably the IRS. Back inside, they found that Julie and Piggy Zhu had already integrated seamlessly into the group. He and Jordan were acting like long-lost brothers. Jessica Monroe had come by in the afternoon to help out. Piggy discovered the little restaurant was full of hidden talents. There was Hannah, the pig-castrating badass. Stella, the cool, aloof beauty who radiated an unapproachable aura even more potent than the debutantes in his circle. And now, this new girl. She was stunning, with incredibly long hair and a unique, edgy vibe. She looked familiar, but he couldn't place her. He must have seen her image on a screen somewhere in D.C. when her portrait was being advertised. The impression had stuck, but he couldn't connect the image to the person standing before him. Jessica's wild, slightly melancholic energy was magnetic to kids like Piggy and Jordan, who'd grown up coddled in happiness. People are often drawn to what they lack. It was the classic setup for an old-school romance novel. But if you took that trope as a life guide, you were screwed. Real-life CEOs had money, not a collective IQ of a houseplant. Jessica, wise beyond her years from working countless odd jobs, knew exactly what Piggy was up to before he even made a move. She shut him down politely, but firmly. She'd met enough guys like him to know how to handle them. You don't entertain fantasies from romance novels, playing hot and cold. You just say no. That evening, Chef Wu had mastered the steamed fish. For the average diner, it was an astonishingly good dish. It seemed his overall skill level was rising. With the restaurant running like a well-oiled machine, Leo found himself with free time. He decided to make another batch of chili sauce for Stella's father. As the night's episode of The Chancellor's Gambit aired, the plot reached a new peak. Audiences were ecstatic. For years, they'd been starved for a show where both the heroes and villains were intelligent, where motives were complex, and where the story was driven by logic. This was it. HBO Max's early access numbers skyrocketed. People were paying per episode, unable to wait. This was must-see TV. In the episode, the heroine believes her childhood betrothed is long dead. Years later, engaged to a man of equal social standing, she settles into a new life. Her fiancé, knowing her love for tea, gives her a rare blend called Dust of Snow, harvested from a remote mountain peak. Touched by the gesture, she resolves to leave the past behind. But even the most cherished tea eventually runs out. At the bottom of the canister, she finds a small piece of paper, and on it, a name, Silas. Above it, a clumsy little couplet from her childhood, a silly rhyme a boy had once written to tease her about her chubby cheeks. With tiny steps, a slow and gentle grace, at the feast of flowers, you're last to find your place. Silas. It was her secret. She'd been so annoyed she'd refused to write back, until he'd sent a small doll to apologize. She had never told a soul, not even her mother. She remembered Silas once asking what kind of tea she liked. She'd said she preferred something light and sweet. I know just the one, he'd told her. It's very sweet. I'll find it for you. She had assumed it was just a polite remark. She never got his tea. Instead, her new fiancé had presented her with the impossibly rare Dust of Snow. Their married life had been peaceful, harmonious. Like the tea, it was good, and day by day it was consumed. Then she found the note. He died. Not far from where she stood, he died with a smile on his face, at peace. He had found the tea for her, after all. He had completed her life, so she could move on. Someone wrote a 3,000-word review based on that one scene. The actors had cried just reading the script. The effect on the audience was devastating. Tragedy is the highest form of art because it stays with you. Director Penelope Hayes knew this character would be a breakout star. She had hesitated before casting a complete unknown, but in the end, she'd trusted her gut. Seeing the final cut, she was deeply grateful for her decision. Before this, he was a nobody. After this, he had a name, Silas. This role was going to make him famous. She couldn't guarantee the show itself would be a hit. That required a perfect storm of timing and luck. But she knew they had captured something special with this character. And she was right. As soon as Silas appeared, the ratings started climbing. After he was revealed as a villain, viewership broke the network's record for the year. Penelope suspected that when he died, the numbers would jump again, possibly breaking records for the past several years. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to dream. The Emmys, the Golden Globes, Best Director, Best Drama Series, Best Actor, Best Supporting Actor, all the awards seemed to be waving at her. It had been over a decade since Chesapeake Tides had swept every category. The momentum was back. Viewers with early access watched Silas die, and they wept. An entire box of tissues wasn't enough. A character whose death makes you cry once is good. A character whose death makes you cry again in a flashback is brilliant. This was supposed to be a political thriller, So why was it so heartbreaking? No wonder Penelope rarely did romance. She was too good at it. She left no room for anyone else. Review after review poured in. Stills from the show were shared everywhere. A gif of Silas's final moments, the look in his eyes, both loving and liberated, went viral. The most profound tragedies aren't the bloody massacres, but the unspoken love, the casual goodbyes that turn out to be final. That night, Penelope Hayes collected a river of tears. Back in the dorm, the roommates watched the episode on a link Jordan had found. Leo, the actor himself, felt a lump in his throat. Even Sean's eyes were glistening. Jordan felt an urgent need for a late-night snack to cope. Alex blew his nose loudly. "It's over, Leo," he said. "If you show up at the food festival now, you're going to cause a stampede. Who could resist this? We know you, and even we're torn up. You're the perfect tragic hero, dying in your prime, all virtues and no flaws." That night, Leo's TikTok followers exploded again. His Instagram, where he'd only posted one promo, saw a similar surge. A message came in from Professor Hoffman. "Get ready to be a star. From now on, people will be watching you everywhere. You're famous. It's like living under a permanent spotlight. So, you have to work even harder to stay grounded. Be yourself. You'll get used to it." In the dorm room late at night, the words didn't quite sink in. The next morning, they did. Leo woke up at his usual time, drank his honey water, and went downstairs to warm up with Professor Reed. But today, the usually quiet corner of campus was crowded with students, mostly girls, snapping pictures. It was absurdly early, but there they were. Next, he took Moose for a run. The track was also more crowded than usual, with more phones pointed his way. By the time he dropped Moose off, grabbed breakfast for his roommates, and got back to the dorm, his face was all over the internet. There were photos of him stretching with Professor Reed, of him running with Moose. They were candid shots, but flattering. The captions were all some variation of, "Silas didn't die. He's a student at Northwood State," or "OMG, Silas goes to my school and works out every morning." His TikTok account, The Roommate Chronicles, had rocketed past 15 million followers. There was a difference between being a popular influencer and being a beloved character from a hit show. One felt approachable, the other felt transcendent. For the first time, he felt the intense heat of real fandom. His classmates had always been cool, but today several students actually asked for his autograph. It was awkward. He realized going to the study hall would be a distraction for everyone. Instead, he called Professor Hoffman. He could feel his heart pounding, a restless energy making it impossible to focus. "Are you free this morning?" he asked. "I'd like to come visit." "I don't have class today," Hoffman said. "I only teach 2 days a week. Easiest job in the world. I'll have my driver come get you." "No, that's okay," Leo said. "I have an assistant. I'll have him drive me." There was a pause. All right then." The reviews were in. The Chancellor's Gambit debuted with a stunning 9.0 on Rotten Tomatoes, with a flood of 5-star ratings. In stark contrast, Storm and Cloud languished at 61%, and that was likely after some creative score manipulation. The real number was probably in the low 50s. After Silas's death aired for the early access viewers, a new wave of reviews hit the site. One, in particular, shot to the top with thousands of upvotes. Title: "The Poem in the Canister. Silas's Gift and the Nature of Evil Silas is a True Villain." The audience is crying their eyes out over his death. "I should know. My girlfriend dragged me into watching this. But I got hooked. It's rare to find a show with a logical plot these days. So kudos for that. My girlfriend sobbed for half the night over Silas. I swear if I died, she wouldn't cry this hard. Lying in my arms, weeping for another man. It's messed up. So, after she fell asleep, I rewatched the whole thing. I finished around 5 a.m. and couldn't sleep, so I wrote this. It's just my opinion, don't come at me. A canister of rare tea, dust of snow, is finally empty. Deep inside, a note with a silly childhood poem, a poison key that unlocks the heroine's carefully sealed past. With tiny steps, a slow and gentle grace, slash at the feast of flowers, you're last to find your place. Silas. This note, once hidden away in girlish annoyance, is Silas's final greeting, sent from the abyss of his vengeful soul. On the surface, it's a grand romantic gesture that transcends death. But if you look at it through the lens of human nature, this so-called gift is a selfish poison. It's his final act of mockery and possession. Silas's life was completely consumed by evil. The slaughter of his family twisted him, dragging him from innocent boyhood into darkness. On his path of revenge, he became a demon. His cruelty, his cold efficiency in killing, extinguished any light left in him. He wasn't a tragic victim of fate. He was a man who consciously embraced evil, using the lives of others as fuel for his vengeful fire. The dust of snow and the note are not a legacy of love, but the ultimate expression of his darkness. This gift is a meticulously planned psychological game. He knew when she would find it. Long after she was married to her respectable fiancé, after the tea was gone and her heart was at peace. This was a precision strike against her psyche. He chose the exact moment she had resolved to leave the past behind to tear open her newly healed wounds. It's a delayed form of mental torture, designed to ensure that even in a happy marriage, she can never truly escape his shadow. It is the cold hand of a dead man, reaching from the grave to claim a piece of her soul, denying her true peace and freedom for the rest of her life. His final smile as he died was not one of peaceful release. It was the satisfied grin of a predator whose trap has finally sprung. It was the closing of the final loop in his grand design of revenge. The tea canister, coated in the sugar of deep affection, was a vessel of poison. This curse, disguised as a gift, reveals a soul utterly consumed by evil. He didn't offer her salvation from the abyss. He handed her a dagger to stab her own heart. Silas may be gone, but with a thin slip of paper, he has managed to leave a permanent chill in the warm life of the woman he supposedly loved. And that, perhaps, was the most perfect ending to his script. Zach Miller. Update. My girlfriend woke up, read this, and punched me in the arm for slandering her man. You all be the judge. I think this is what makes Penelope Hayes a genius. Who says a victim has to remain pure of heart? His family was murdered. Of course he turned dark. He's not going to suddenly become a lovesick puppy and abandon his life's mission for a girl. This is realistic. He plotted to make sure that even in death, he would be a permanent third person in their marriage. Now stop hitting me. My arm is bruised. Zach Miller. The review went viral. A lot of people agreed with the dark take. In just a few hours, it had over 1,000 upvotes. The Chancellor's Gambit was the hottest show on TV, and everyone was talking about it. That handsome prince who seemed like a major player, stabbed by Silas 2 episodes after his introduction. It was unexpectedly satisfying. This Zach Miller's review gave voice to what many were feeling. That feeling of a white moonlight who refuses to let you go, even in death. It was a chilling thought. The theory sparked another debate. People started screenshotting scenes between Silas and the male protagonist, pointing out their grudging respect and unspoken alliance. A new ship was born. Leo dozed for 10 minutes. Mr. Lou drove with a steady hand, a fundamental skill for any top-tier assistant. The cool eye mask Leo had put on helped him drift off quickly, a sign he hadn't slept well. A night full of dreams meant his mind was still churning. He woke when they reached the gated community. Mr. Lou was explaining their destination to the guard, whose questions were just loud enough to rouse Leo. Mr. Lou regretted not taking the Bentley. The guards at these places were so used to luxury cars that the Rivian probably looked pedestrian to them. But as the guard was taking down their information, he glanced at the passenger and immediately recognized Leo. He'd seen the young man visit Professor Hoffman and other bigwigs in the neighborhood before. The gate lifted without another word. At Professor Hoffman's house, Leo got out. Mr. Lou retrieved the gifts from the trunk, some heirloom cabbages and a box of freshly made crullers. He never showed up empty-handed. Since Judge Cole lived nearby, Leo had brought 2 of everything. Mr. Lou, ever the professional, carried them to the door. Leo told him to wait, that he could use the time to get familiar with the area. Mr. Lou knew the protocol. He'd learned it under Richard Vance. He greeted the professor politely, introduced himself as Mr. Lou, and when he heard they were going fishing, he offered to help set up. He arranged the chairs, baited the hooks, and mixed the chum, all with a natural ease that put everyone at ease. Once everything was ready, he discreetly excused himself. Sitting in the car, he saw a group approaching, an elderly man walking with 2 men who moved with the unmistakable bearing of military bodyguards. He just heard Professor Hoffman mention Judge Cole was coming over. As they got closer, Mr. Lou recognized the face. It was Judge Cole, a former titan of the state's legal and political world. A cold sweat broke out on Mr. Lou's neck. He remembered the gifts he just carried in. 2 bundles of old, tough-looking cabbage and a box of crullers. You're giving that to a man like Judge Cole? A horse wouldn't even eat that cabbage. What about the judge's teeth? But as an assistant, you don't question the boss's decisions. To his surprise, Judge Cole was delighted. He saw so many people trying to curry favor with expensive gifts that Leo's simple, honest offering was a refreshing change. The morning sun was warm enough to stave off the chill. An old man, a middle-aged man, and a young man sat fishing in comfortable silence. With only a basic level 2 fishing skill, Leo shouldn't have had an advantage, but after half an hour with no bites for anyone, his rod suddenly bent. "This kid called me this morning," Professor Hoffman said to the judge, a smile in his voice. Said he was famous, and it was freaking him out. I told him to come over. Between the two of us, we've got enough years on him to offer some perspective. Judge Cole clapped Leo on the shoulder. "Good kid. Fame hasn't gone to his head. He's smart enough to ask his elders for guidance." He chuckled. "Penelope's show is fantastic. Everyone is talking about it. My old teacher once told me something from the Zhuan. That by which you rise is that by which you will fall. It's something to think about. If you gain glory from fans, you can also lose it because of them." Leo nodded, soaking it in. Professor Hoffman reeled in his line and cast it again. "The judge is right. And as your professor, I'll give you another one from the great learning. Know your goal, and you can be steady. Be steady, and you can be calm. Be calm, and you can be at peace. Be at peace, and you can think clearly. Think clearly, and you can achieve." And then there's Plato's allegory of the cave. Think of your fans as the shadows on the wall. You are the one who is real. Damn, Leo thought. Smart people really know their philosophy. Even if you don't use it every day, it makes you sound profound. As he was contemplating this, his line went taut again. He'd broken the deadlock. Judge Cole and Professor Hoffman just shook their heads. The kid's luck was uncanny. Same spot, same bait, but the fish always went for him. It was a small one, but its silver scales glittered beautifully in the sun. He cast again. Another bite. And another. Judge Cole was getting antsy. "You know, kid, it's okay to be a little arrogant. You're young. As long as you don't make any catastrophic mistakes, you're allowed to be a bit flashy. Don't just sit here fishing like a couple of old men." "He's right," Hoffman chimed in. "Go on, Scram. You're scaring all our fish away." Leo laughed and moved a few feet away. He tore up one of the cabbages he'd brought and tossed the leaves onto the water. A swarm of fish immediately appeared. "Mister." Lou had a packed schedule. A great assistant anticipates the boss's needs, a precursor to a chief of staff. He had to fill out a mountain of paperwork for Leo's induction into the National Arts Guild. He looked it up. Leo would be the youngest official member in its history. Membership alone guaranteed an artist's work would command high prices. The paperwork was a nightmare. Leo had tried once before with his national certification and given up after 2 hours. Ms. Miller had thankfully stepped in, but he couldn't keep bothering her. Now he had Mr. Lou. After leaving the professor's neighborhood, Mr. Lou drove to the ranch. They needed to hire and train new staff. He suspected the boss's herbal remedies were the real secret to their success. One of Leo's other titles was the prized disciple of a famous traditional doctor. That was likely what had attracted the wealthy client from the Middle East. If so, the ranch's business model needed to shift from a public facility to something more exclusive. He thought about his own life. Raised by his grandparents after his parents' divorce, he'd studied relentlessly, acing every exam, driven by the dream of bringing his grandmother to the big city. But he couldn't outrun time. They were gone before he made it. Life was like that. Now his ambition was channeled into his work. He respected Chef Wu, who had become even more diligent since signing his long-term contract, his cooking reaching new levels. Mr. Liu was a demanding supervisor, a habit picked up from the great capitalist Richard Vance. But he couldn't find a single fault with the old chef. His loyalty to Leo was solidifying. Mr. Vance's connections were rumored, whispered about. Leo's were real. He'd mailed packages for Leo to addresses that didn't show up on any map. And today, he'd seen him fishing with Judge Cole, their relationship easy and familiar, not transactional. He renewed his vow. He would become the greatest workhorse, a holy steed in service to his new boss. Back in the yard, Leo's cabbage leaf chumming was attracting a frenzy of fish. Professor Hoffman and Judge Cole exchanged a look. Stay calm, stay calm. They were just fishermen. On the water, all fishermen are equal. Finally, the judge's rod twitched. He pulled up a small half-pound sunfish. Professor Hoffman, still fishless, couldn't take it anymore. He grabbed a long-handled net, plunged it into the cabbage-frenzied water, and miraculously scooped one up. All three had now caught a fish. They retreated from the breeze into Hoffman's combination cigar lounge, tea room, and home theater. Leo, as was custom, took the lead in preparing the tea. Before a meal, it was best to have a light white or green tea. After, a darker pu'er or black tea to aid digestion. Hoffman's tea collection was housed in a beautiful cabinet that resembled a traditional apothecary's chest, each small drawer labeled. Leo selected a golden flower white tea, its quality apparent from the aroma alone. As he warmed the cups, Hoffman brought out the crullers Leo had made. The fishing had worked up an appetite. They snacked and chatted, and the conversation drifted to the portrait of General Ingram they'd all seen on the national news a few days prior. Just before noon, Penelope Hayes returned. She was dressed formally from a business trip, wearing a black dress with gold trim under a stylish coat. Professor Hoffman immediately began to dote on her, taking her bag and massaging her travel-weary shoulders. Leo had the emotional intelligence not to show off his own superior massage skills. He understood this was a ritual for them, a display of affection where the quality of the massage was less important than the loving gesture itself. It was pure emotional support. The Hoffman-Hayes household was a picture of a healthy partnership. He worked a relaxed 2-day-a-week schedule, while she often worked around the clock. In most marriages, this disparity would breed resentment. But they had mastered the art of mutual respect and support. A stable home, Leo realized, was a force multiplier for a successful career. "I found a set of antique books I thought you'd like," Penelope said. "I had them sent over." Leo saw Hoffman's smile widen, his hands working with renewed vigor. They all sat for tea. Penelope ate a crull, remarking how delicious it was, the perfect snack to take on set during long shoots. "Leo made them," Hoffman said proudly. "You can't buy them. If you want more, you'll have to ask him." Penelope looked at Leo, who was preparing the tea with a calm, fluid grace. He seemed so much more self-assured than when she'd first met him on set. Then, he'd been a bit reserved and used to the attention. Now, that shyness was gone, replaced by a quiet confidence. The uncut jade had been polished, revealing a priceless inner quality. His composure was remarkable. She had rushed back today, using the excuse of craving his cooking, but her real purpose was to talk to him. She'd seen too many young talents in her industry get destroyed by fame. They were given the spotlight, the crown, only to have it manipulated until they lost themselves completely, replaced by the next new thing. She had been trying to shield Leo from the vultures, but she couldn't block everyone. Ultimately, he had to be strong enough to stand on his own. But it was so hard. He was only 21, an age where arrogance and recklessness were the norm. He was still in the protective bubble of college. Yet here he was, in the eye of a hurricane of fame, as serene as ever. He wasn't arrogant, nor was he anxious. Her own frantic energy began to calm just by being near him. Perhaps she thought he was perfectly suited for this life after all. Leo went to the kitchen to prepare the fish they had caught. Penelope watched him go, then turned to her husband and the judge. "He's really something," she said, a note of wonder in her voice. "I was so worried he'd let the sudden fame go to his head. When I got my big break, I was insufferable. He's handling it better than I did, and he's so young. His potential is limitless." Judge Cole nodded in agreement. Many people can feign humility, but at his age, to be genuinely grounded, that's rare indeed. They ate a wonderful lunch. The conversation was easy and comfortable, a meal among friends, not a networking event. And the steamed fish was extraordinary, even better than before. Professor Hoffman and Judge Cole chalked it up to the satisfaction of having caught it themselves. Talking with the old guard really worked. Leo felt the knot of anxiety in his chest finally loosen. With his emotions settled, the world seemed to click back into focus. Professor Hoffman, Penelope Hayes, and Judge Cole had each offered their perspective, guiding him without being condescending. They hadn't resorted to the classic, "I've eaten more salt than you have rice," or "I've walked more bridges than you have roads, so just listen to me." That kind of talk just made you want to do the opposite. The average young person's head weighs about 10 pounds, and 9 of those pounds are pure defiance. Tell them not to do something, and they'll make it their mission to try it. When in doubt, find Professor Hoffman. It was a solid rule to live by. After dinner, they chatted for a while longer. Leo, feeling a new surge of confidence in his photography, offered to take a portrait of the professor and his wife. Professor Hoffman was delighted. He'd already complimented Penelope several times on how sharp she looked today. Leo snapped a few casual shots, getting one of Judge Cole as well. The results were fantastic. Everyone looked relaxed and natural. The angles were perfect, and the crimson maples in the background provided a stunning backdrop. Red leaves above, good fortune ahead. Judge Cole wasn't concerned with looking handsome anymore. At his age, just looking healthy was a major victory. But in Leo's photo, the judge was undeniably dapper, a genuinely distinguished, handsome old man. No wonder Director Cole is so good-looking, Leo thought. He gets it from his dad. Seeing Leo's camera, Professor Hoffman got an itch. What trophy husband hadn't dabbled in photography? It was basic training. He might not be on Leo's level, or even Sean's, but he'd taken over 9,000 photos of Penelope on their travels. He knew his way around a portrait. He insisted on taking a group photo of Leo with Penelope and the judge. After the impromptu photo shoot, it was time for Judge Cole's afternoon rest. His driver, a man named Lou, arrived right on time to pick him up. Walt, Professor Hoffman's driver, had been on standby all afternoon, having heard from the kitchen staff that the professor was hosting his student and a major figure from next door. But his services weren't needed, the young mister. Foster had brought his own driver. Walt could only wait with a mix of regret and relief. He was glad he'd done Leo that small favor earlier, pointing him to a good driving school. It was a tiny connection, but a connection nonetheless. When you get a rare chance to be around someone important, you have to make the most of it because you might never cross paths again. And it was true. Most of Professor Hoffman and Penelope Hayes' high-profile guests already had their own drivers. Lou had arrived early, making small talk with the security guard at the gate, offering him a cigarette. He wasn't asking for anything, just getting his face known. It made things smoother down the line. If you had to get grilled by security every time you drove your boss somewhere, it meant you hadn't done your prep work. Leo didn't head straight back to campus. He had Lou drive him to the boxing gym. When you're feeling lost, talking it out is one option. The other is exercise. A 1-2 punch of mental and physical release was a guaranteed cure. No amount of overthinking could beat a good sweat. It was like your whole body was a single unit. When your mind was confused, every organ felt it. Calming your brain was only half the battle. The rest of your body needed soothing, too, and that's where sports came in. Of all sports, boxing was the kindest to your emotions. Not sparring, of course. Getting punched repeatedly doesn't do wonders for your mood. But practicing on a bag, every swing engaged nearly every muscle in your body, and with each punch, a bit of frustration was expelled. As a premium member at the Crucible, he had a professional coach to work with, which made the experience even more satisfying. Leo felt that since his core strength had improved, his boxing had jumped several levels. He'd always felt strong and fast, but his overall technique was lacking. His power was localized, never fully translating through his whole body. Now, with a stronger core, every punch felt effortless, fluid. He could handle himself in a way he never could before. Leo didn't come to the gym often, but his attendance was still better than those who bought a membership and then vanished. While most people unwound by watching TV, which has the broadest possible audience, TikTok was a different beast. Its algorithm creates information bubbles. You could scroll for hours and never see certain content. But a hit TV show, that breaks through. Even if you don't watch it, someone you know will recommend it. Lately, the hot topic at the gym was the Chancellor's Feast. Discussing TV was safe, offered the thrill of judging other people's fictional lives, and steered clear of politics. One of the trainers mentioned that the actor who played Silas was apparently a member there. Member information was confidential, but office gossip happened. A trainer looking to impress a client might accidentally let it slip to make the gym seem more exclusive. The moment Leo walked in, someone notified the owner. The owner had given him a free membership after Leo's TikTok from the gym went viral, back when he had far fewer followers. The guy knew how to network. As Leo's channel grew, the video remained. The owner couldn't use it for official promotion, but plenty of new clients had signed up after seeing it, especially in the last couple of days. The business had been so slow he'd been considering shutting down, but the mountain of membership refunds was a deterrent. Was it better to take a huge one-time loss or bleed out slowly? It was a tough call. Now, suddenly, the gym was resurrected. It felt like a bad romance, deciding on a messy divorce, only to find out your partner still loved you after all. Leo's session was exhilarating. Core strength was everything. With it, his boxing proficiency skyrocketed. He finally understood that his coach had been going easy on him before, like sparring with a grade schooler. Today, for the first time, it felt like a real match. He was trading blows with his coach, sweat flying, when the system's voice chimed in his head. Congratulations. Host has achieved intermediate boxing proficiency, level 3. Penelope Hayes posted to her Facebook. She had, of course, asked Judge Cole for permission first, and he nodded. He was retired, he was fond of Leo, and Penelope was a time-tested, solid person. There was no harm in it. As a public figure, he was used to people trying to snag a photo with him. Early in his career, he'd been naive, and people at events would just slide in for a picture. There was a whole class of professional climbers who did that, starting with minor officials and using those photos as leverage to get closer and closer to the top. One guy had even parlayed it into a scam, bilking people out of millions before he finally got caught. The speed at which he'd made money was faster than any phishing scheme. Penelope posted 3 photos, one of her and Luke, one of the 3 of them with Leo and Judge Cole, and one of the steamed fish. Her caption, Kyle asked why I skipped out of work midday. I told him I had to go home for the fish. The likes poured in instantly, from people both inside and outside the industry. Penelope rarely posted on social media. The industry rumor was that she was a hopeless romantic, head over heels for her younger husband, but she usually showed it through actions, bringing Professor Hoffman gifts from her travels, rather than online declarations. Of course, she didn't need to. The professor himself would write a best-selling book about it. Her posts were usually just official promotions for her shows. This was different. Seeing Penelope and Luke still so clearly in love after all these years, but not in a cloying way, was refreshing. Anyone who'd studied micro-expressions could see it. They complemented each other perfectly. In their body language, you could see Professor Hoffman leaning into her, a physical admission that, for all his philosophical musings, his body knew who he depended on. But the photo with Leo and Judge Cole was the real bombshell. For Penelope to post something so personal, it had to be significant. While most people don't follow local politics, a certain subset, the high achievers, the wealthy, the powerful, paid close attention. And Judge Cole's face, his very presence, screamed, "I am a very, very important person." It was the kind of gravitas that comes from years of holding a position of power, an authenticity that couldn't be faked. Some people, seeing the photo, felt a pang of sour grapes. Of course, Penelope's new show was a hit. She must have powerful backers. They retroactively decided that her first big success, Chesapeake Tides, must have been the result of some powerful benefactor pulling strings. No wonder she had such a high standing in the industry, untouched by the usual scandals. You're untouchable if you're either protected by a titan or you're the titan. And those awards committees could be fickle. Even when a winner was obvious, they'd often stir up drama for the sake of ratings, sometimes even letting a dark horse win. But after seeing Penelope's post, they knew they have to at least play fair. The buzz around Silas, the breakout newcomer, had been intense. To say the industry was going crazy trying to find him was an exaggeration, but the interest was real. Many wanted to capitalize on his sudden fame, to sign him cheap before he knew his own value. A surprise star like him, if managed well, could be a gold mine. The companies, focused on profit over personal development, would wring every last drop of value out of him. Many newcomers, having never seen real money, would jump at the first big offer. An extra who made a few $1,000s on a show is suddenly offered a contract for hundreds of thousands, $1 million, with promises of stardom and endless resources. They sign on the dotted line, only to regret it for the rest of their lives when they realize the true value of what they created. Penelope had already shut down the more predatory offers. She'd put out the word. Silas was her husband's student, still in college, and was not to be disturbed. Now this photo, it confirmed his connection to Penelope, but his posture in the picture suggested an even closer relationship with the old man. Leo blinked. It's because I've spent more time with Judge Cole than with her. Plus, Professor Hoffman was taking the picture. It would have been weird to lean in too close to my professor's wife. His natural posture was to lean slightly toward the judge. The photo was excellent. Judge Cole was handsome, and Leo's looks were undeniable. Professor Hoffman's photography skills, honed by years of practice, were well above average. It all started to make sense to the online detectives. This was why Silas had blown up. The Chancellor's gambit seemed tailor-made for him. The role was small but perfect. Rumor had it that a major investor had poured money into the production mid-shoot, specifically to expand Silas's part. It all connected. It explained why Penelope had rejected Cade, the top rising star, for the role, and why a cast of veteran actors had all served as a backdrop for this unknown newcomer. There's no such thing as overnight success. It's always meticulously planned. Penelope had been grooming him all along. Silas was someone special. He had a titan behind him. The internet sleuths dug for more evidence, pulling threads from his TikToks. Silas ate at a noodle shop in the capital where the chef was the same man who had cooked for foreign heads of state at a state dinner. Dylan Sloan, one of the D.C. elite, was seen working at Silas's private kitchen, acting like an underling. The horse he rode, Monarch, was a world-class racehorse. The original seller told reporters it had been bought by a mysterious Eastern nobleman. He was inducted into the prestigious Bridgewater Fellowship at a young age, an incredibly difficult honor to achieve. He had a solo art exhibition in New York City, complete with a massive billboard in the city center. A painting seen hanging in the background of a national news broadcast in a general's office was attributed to him. Some questioned this, thinking it was just hype, but it at least proved a close connection to the general. He held a Level 1 national title from the American Tea Association. He had donated over $1 million to a struggling county. But the most damning evidence came from interviews with foreigners. They all spoke of Silas as true nobility, a mysterious aristocrat, practically royalty. Surely, they wouldn't just make that up. They must have inside information. The foreigners, no idea We were just guessing. And then there was the final nail in the coffin. A portrait of him had won this year's Alexander Lucci painting prize. It was a modern-day fable. It was like the story of a young Rockefeller, heir to a massive fortune, being praised in a nationally syndicated article written by a famous intellectual for giving a single dime to a beggar. The story becomes a legend, a testament to his character. But you had to read between the lines. An intellectual wrote the article, and a top-tier artist painted the portrait. You had to appreciate the artistry of it all. After his workout, Leo had a meal in the gym's members' lounge. The spread had once seemed luxurious to him, but now that he was running his own restaurant, he saw it differently. To ensure freshness, you had to provide good ingredients, but with few members showing up, it led to immense waste. It was like choosing a restaurant when you're traveling. You instinctively pick the crowded one because high turnover means the food is fresh. If you walk into an empty place, you're likely eating whatever they couldn't bear to throw out yesterday. The lounge food was served buffet style, like a hotel breakfast, with a dazzling array of options. But it was still wasteful. Many dishes were just for show, old actors on a stage that no one was watching. If nobody ate them, they were either thrown out, a pure waste, or they weren't, which meant they weren't fresh. It was the cost of doing business in food service. Having his own place had taught him that nothing was as easy as it looked. He used to think the gym's high membership fees meant they were printing money. Now he understood that balancing a high-end service with a restaurant was a nightmare. As he was finishing his meal, the owner appeared. He timed it perfectly. A person with a full stomach is generally in a better mood. A fed tiger is a lazy tiger. The owner thanked Leo for the traffic his videos had brought to the gym, then smoothly asked if he could use Leo's image for promotion. Leo refused. Sorry, no. It was awkward. Penelope had just suggested he try acting, and he turned her down too. The owner didn't seem offended. Despite the rejection, he apologized and presented Leo with a lifetime membership card. It wasn't a loss for him. If the gym stayed open, he had a celebrity member for life. If it went under, a lifetime membership was worthless. It was a membership for the life of the gym, not Leo's life. That's how Leo found out someone had posted a video of him boxing. It was inevitable. Now that his TikTok was popular, people were always trying to catch candid footage of him. You couldn't avoid it. He'd heard there was even an app in New York where you could hire bodyguards by the hour just to look important. It was supposedly popular among people going through messy divorces who needed an escort to pick up their things. Leo figured he didn't need bodyguards. Improving his own fighting skills was better security. Besides, real bodyguards in this country were more for deterrence. They couldn't actually start a fight. He'd had an early dinner, and the sun was still up. What he really wanted was to meet Stella at Clearwater Cove. No workout was as stress-relieving as a two-person workout. Chef Wu could handle the restaurant for a night. But now that he had Lou as a driver, it felt a little awkward. Before, he could use the flimsy excuse of going to the ranch. Now, he didn't even have that. His skin wasn't thick enough. The gym owner, on the other hand, was a master. He made a request, got rejected, and still came out ahead without making anyone angry. Leo decided against it. His energy was spent from boxing. Best to just head back to school. He called Lou, who, to his surprise, was already waiting downstairs. As they drove, Lou brought him up to speed. Sir, someone posted a video of you at the gym. Should I contact them and have it taken down? Leo shook his head. It's fine. The owner already handled it. He promised it won't happen again and gave me a lifetime membership. He figured he wasn't a real celebrity. People would get bored and stop filming him soon enough. After the workout, Leo was still buzzing with energy. He struck up a conversation with Lou, asking about his family. If Lou was going to be the person who knew the most about his life, Leo figured he should know a little about him, too. He seemed to remember Alex mentioning Lou was married. My wife and I were college sweethearts, Lou said, his voice even. We both worked for Mr. Vance, but she got pregnant. After her maternity leave, our son was often sick. My mother-in-law helped, but my wife was still worried, so she quit. She's a talented artist and opened a small art class for kids in our neighborhood. He continued. Her parents work for the electric company. Her mom's retired, but her dad is still there. My father is in Salt Lake City. He remarried and has a son. My mother is in San Diego. She also remarried and has a stepson and a daughter. They're all doing okay. We don't see them much, just a phone call on holidays. My grandparents raised me. After they passed, I only go back on Memorial Day. Lou delivered the information matter-of-factly, but Leo felt a knot in his stomach. He imagined a little boy, passed over as his parents built new families with new children. It couldn't have been easy. My wife's an only child, Lou added. Her parents are wonderful people. She quit her job partly because she was stressed, Mr. Vance is demanding, but also because her focus shifted to our son after he was born. She's a homebody, and so am I. With her at home, I can focus on my work without worrying. She took a step back from me. That's great, Leo said sincerely. You should bring your daughter to the ranch sometime. I think we have some miniature horses she could ride. Thank you, sir. I'd like that. Lou accepted the offer gracefully. He'd laid his cards on the table, giving his new boss a clear picture of his life. A stable family in Bridgeport, in-laws with respectable jobs, and a complicated but distant relationship with his biological parents. A clean slate. Leo closed his eyes to rest. Host has decisively rejected an unreasonable request without hesitation. The system's voice announced. Reward. Basic item, buff. Master Persuader 1 day. With this buff, the host can guide and persuade others with an 80% increased success rate. As long as the request does not violate fundamental human principles, the target is highly likely to agree. Leo's eyes snapped open. The traffic light ahead glowed red. Lou, he said, turning to his driver. What kind of person is Mr. Vance? Do you think it would be appropriate for me to pay him a visit tomorrow? The drive back to campus was always beautiful. It wound through a dense forest, and in the summer, the crepe myrtle trees that lined the road would explode in a riot of coral pink blossoms. It was a stunning sight. Huge, ancient trees covered in flowers. It reminded Leo of a poem he'd read about a flowering tree, which he'd always assumed was just a romantic fantasy. But here was real. It was the kind of road that was made for a sports car, with thrilling, dangerous curves. Lou considered the question. Was this a test? As a private assistant, revealing secrets about a former employer to a new one was a cardinal sin. It might score you points in short term, but it destroyed your career. If you betray one boss, you'd betray another. But saying nothing would make it seem like his loyalty was still with his old boss. It was a fine line to walk. He chose his words carefully. Mr. Vance is a formidable person, but he is principled. He doesn't annihilate his enemies. He always leaves them out. He is incredibly generous and loyal to his friends. Working with him is almost always profitable. He has a powerful charisma, and many people are willing to follow him. If I hadn't met you, sir, I would have likely remained in his service indefinitely. Leo filed the description away to have Alex translate later. It sounded less like a girlfriend's father and more like a mafia don. He pulled out his phone and texted Stella. Leo, hey, are your parents free tomorrow? I'd like to come over and meet them. Formally. It wasn't just Leo who was nervous about meeting the parents. Stella was too. But it was better for the guy to be the one to initiate, to be decisive. She liked that he was taking charge of this. They'd talked about it before, but she sensed his hesitation, his underlying immaturity. He still felt more like a boy than a man. Just yesterday, he'd been showing off by doing push-ups for her, the mental age of a 10-year-old tops. The topic had been slowly fading, and she decided to let it go. If it happened, it happened. So his sudden message was a surprise. Stella, they should be home. Are you sure you're not scared anymore? Leo, the ugly son-in-law has to meet the in-laws eventually. I think I'm ready, but what do I bring as a gift? That was the question that had been tormenting him. He could bring Professor Hoffman an heirloom cabbage, but he was pretty sure that wouldn't fly here. He'd be thrown out on his ear. Stella's family was wealthy. They didn't need expensive things. But he couldn't show up with something cheap, either. This wasn't a casual visit where a case of beer or a bottle of wine would do. He didn't ask his parents. It was strange. As a kid, he'd listened to them, but at some point, he'd started to question their advice. Their life experience didn't always seem relevant to his world. It was the reality for most families. Only people like Alex had parents who could guide them every step of the way. The typical family dynamic was more like, you don't know anything. What do you know? I don't want to hear it. Dad, I'm broke. He loved his parents, but telling them about this would require a feature-length explanation about his girlfriend, and he worried his mom would get so excited she'd go out and buy them a house. So he texted his uncle, Clay. The last message in their chat was a money transfer from his uncle. Leo, Uncle Clay, I'm meeting my girlfriend's parents tomorrow. What should I bring? Clay Foster had been in the lab all day. He was a rising star in his field, one of only 2 professors at his university to secure a major national grant, which came with a nearly 7-figure research and relocation bonus. When he'd met his own future in-laws, he was already an accomplished young academic and handsome to boot. His only weakness was his modest family background. He was surprised by his nephew's text. In the blink of an eye, the kid was old enough to be meeting the parents, practically ready to get married. Just yesterday at dinner, he and his wife had been talking about Leo. She was obsessed with the Chancellor's Gambit, and it turned out Leo was the actor playing her favorite character. Clay had always considered himself the peak of the Foster family's gene pool, but his nephew had surpassed him. Even knowing it was Leo, his wife had cried her eyes out watching the show. Great directors were something else. They could make you laugh and cry on command. The show had even brought Clay some bizarre, reflected fame. People were saying that if Silas had lived, he would have grown up to look just like him. A student had even confessed her love for him on campus, which had terrified him. He was a married man. Yesterday, his wife had asked if Leo was going to become a full-time actor. Clay doubted it. His nephew was a good kid, but he didn't have the personality for that world. He wasn't a smooth talker, and he didn't handle pressure well. The entertainment industry was a meat grinder. But that was a problem for another day. Right now, his nephew needed advice. Clay thought back to his own experience. His father-in-law had been his professor and a dean at the university, and his mother-in-law had been sending him home-cooked meals via her daughter long before he'd formally visited. He honestly couldn't remember what gift he'd brought. The private kitchen was a hive of activity that night. A person's mind might slow down in the evening, but the body often finds a second wind. It was probably a genetic imperative for procreation, nature's way of saying, hey, you don't need your brain for this next part. Chef Wu was a whirlwind of motion. Whatever he'd promised his two assistants, it was working. They were more energetic than ever. The three of them, along with Cal, the handyman, kept the kitchen running. Cal was small and wiry, quick as a monkey, but his sharp features gave him a perpetually worried look. Because of this, he tended to stay out of the dining room, sticking to manual labor. When Leo arrived, he first started a medicinal decoction for Monarch, the horse, and left Cal to watch over it. The formula for treating injuries was a 3-dose regimen. The other formula, for fertility, he planned to use on the other horses at the ranch. He discussed it with his godfather, Dar Shun, who praised him as a genius, marveling at how some people could absorb knowledge so effortlessly. Dr. Shun, who had built his own career on traditional formulas, wasn't suspicious. He saw it, as his godson, taking a practical, hands-on approach, applying his studies to the patients he had available at the ranch. Leo was baffled by the effusive praise, but he wasn't going to complain. It was nice to have a mentor who was so encouraging. He had Lou run the numbers on the ranch's horse breeding program. The results were negative growth. Modern-day livestock, it turned out, had their own fertility problems. With the medicine simmering, Leo left Cal in charge. The kid didn't talk much, but he followed instructions to the letter. After signing his long-term contract, Chef Wu had filled Leo in on the staff dynamics. Cal was from his wife's village. He'd been a child prodigy, able to do complex calculations in his head at age 3, but a high fever that his parents neglected had left him with developmental issues. His mother left, his father drank himself to death, and Cal was left to wander the village, doing odd jobs for food. He might have been intellectually disabled, but he could fix any broken appliance. Wu, a former soldier with a strong sense of justice, had taken Cal under his wing when he left for the city. He told Cal to speak as little as possible. Silence could be mistaken for shyness. Speaking would reveal his struggles and make him a target. It was a strange situation. The private kitchen's electrician was a hidden savant. It explained why Cal hadn't left with the previous owner. Leo had never noticed anything was off. He'd just seen a quiet kid who did his work diligently. He looked just like any other college student tasked with a boring job. Running a business was like opening a series of mystery boxes. You never knew what you'd find. With the medicine taken care of, Leo started making his chicken cakes. Ever since hearing the story about the marriage proposal, he'd become a little obsessed with them. He was determined not to eat them on the way. He could always have one at Stella's house. He decided to prepare a box of them as a gift for her parents. The cakes themselves were simple, but the restaurant had recently commissioned beautiful custom boxes, inspired by the packaging for the high-end Amber Bloom Pu'er tea. His new contact, Joy Run, had helped him source them without getting ripped off. A box of 6 went for $35, a dozen for $70. They looked as elegant as a high-end box of mooncakes, but unlike mooncakes, they were actually delicious. Julian Piggy Zhu, who had been exiled to the restaurant, was having the time of his life. He bounced from learning cocktails with Jordan to running food to now helping Leo in the kitchen. He'd never worked so hard, and he was sleeping and eating better than ever. The constant activity was probably enough to make him lose weight, if he wasn't also eating twice as much. He and Jordan had hit it off immediately. But then, Jordan would probably hit it off with any lazy, rich kid. The key difference was that Piggy, for all his laziness, came from a powerful family, which gave him a certain cachet. Before starting on the chicken cakes, Piggy had called home. His doting parents were worried. His mother thought the location was too remote, the conditions too harsh. She couldn't understand why his uncle and cousin were putting him through this. A dark thought even crossed her mind. Maybe her mother-in-law was sick and they were trying to get Piggy out of the way, so she'd leave her inheritance to someone else. No, that was ridiculous. Grandma had eaten a whole rack of barbecue ribs just yesterday. She adored Piggy. So, are you getting along with Mr. Foster? His mother asked. It's great. I'm good friends with his roommates, Jordan and Alex. Leo, Mr. Foster, is pretty busy, so I don't see him all the time. Mom, can you ship my car here? Leo likes cars. We could drive together. It's a great way to bond. His mother considered it. I'll ask your father. Good, Piggy thought. As long as she doesn't ask my uncle. Okay, gotta go. And send the red one in the middle of the garage. Don't get it wrong. His mother hung up, half impressed that her son was thinking strategically about building relationships, half exasperated that it was all just a ploy to get his car. Piggy's mother was stunningly beautiful, the kind of beauty that made you forgive a complete lack of brains. By the system standards, she was a solid 9. Piggy, meanwhile, felt a sense of accomplishment. He complained. He'd gotten his car, a successful negotiation. He still didn't quite understand why his family had sent him here. They'd even sent a whole construction crew to build a villa for Leo as part of the deal. He thought they'd misjudged the situation. Jordan and Alex were cool, and Leo was a nice guy, but this was just a temporary vacation. He'd go back to his life of aimless leisure, unchanged. If Dylan Sloan could change, it was because he had to. His family was in ruins. Piggy's family was at the top of their game. His uncle and cousin were titans. He could afford to be lazy. He joined Leo in the kitchen, treating the cake-making like a fun game. To Leo, it felt like having a destructive toddler underfoot. He spilled sugar, sent flour flying, and laughed like he didn't have a care in the world. He was the quintessential rich, clueless kid who'd been sent to get some work experience. You couldn't yell at him, but you couldn't praise him either, because he was genuinely useless. The cost of supervising him was higher than just doing the work yourself. But then Leo remembered the construction crew, working away at the ranch, building his villa at cost, with all the materials and permits handled. It was an enormous gift, a favor worth millions. And this was the price, babysitting a spoiled but harmless kid. Leo had experience with kids. He was always the one entertaining his younger cousins during the holidays. He had a natural affinity for them. He could handle this. The 3 years you spend studying in Germany will be the most unforgettable 7 years of your 5-year life. Looking back on this decade, you'll feel you've lived a very full life. A reader's comment in that moment, Piggy didn't know what his future held, but he felt a surge of pride and purpose. His whole body felt alive, his heart thumping with excitement. Back in the capital, the Zhu family was even more excited. Piggy's uncle, Julian Sr., created a new family group chat, without Piggy, and laid down the law. His nephew was turning over a new leaf. Anyone who got in his way would be severely punished. This was mainly directed at his unreliable brother, sister-in-law, and mother. The group chat exploded. Germany? Piggy's cousin was stunned. All his friends who had studied abroad said Germany was the real deal. You couldn't fake your way through it. The system was designed to weed out slackers. Had his little brother been kicked in the head by a donkey? And if so, could they thank the donkey? The whole family was thrilled. His grandmother, though sad he'd be so far away, was fully supportive. His mother was already Googling whether she could move to Germany with him, buy an apartment, and hire a private chef. His father was just proud. For the first time in his life, his son had voluntarily chosen to do something difficult. This is what happens when you make good friends, his grandmother declared. You are the company you keep. Mom's right, his parents chimed in. His uncle and cousin exchanged a look. What else does Mr. Foster need? His father asked. I'll send it right over. Absolutely, his grandmother agreed. We must thank him properly. Julian said Leo likes cars. His mother added. He won't eat his here if he's in Germany. We should just give a few to Leo. Back at the restaurant, the atmosphere was jubilant. Piggy, filled with his newfound purpose, suddenly saw his time there as meaningful, his last taste of freedom before his academic adventure. He became more observant, more present. And for the first time, he noticed Sean, the cameraman. Holy crap, there's another roommate. He'd been so oblivious. Cameras don't walk on their own. He rushed over to apologize. I'm so sorry, man. You should work for Reuters. I didn't even see you. Sean was used to being ignored. The apology actually made him a little flustered. It's fine, he mumbled. I'm pretty quiet. It's normal. Then he added, I was filming Leo making the cakes, and you might be in some of the shots. I can send you the video. If you don't like it, I can edit you out. Piggy's eyes widened. The video. He had completely forgotten the entire reason he was here. Dylan Sloan's redemption arc had started in one of Leo's videos, and he had completely ignored the director. No, don't edit me out. Please keep me in. Just make me look thin. Thanks, Sean. Sean quickly edited the video and showed it to him. Piggy watched it 5 times. He looked so handsome, so motivated. This Sean guy was a genius with a camera. He saved the video and immediately sent it to the family group chat. In the other family chat, the mystery was solved. So that's why he was going to Germany. He'd been sweet-talked into it. All their years of lecturing had done nothing but a few words from this kid, and he was ready to hit the books. And they had to admit, watching the video, this Leo Foster was impressive. He was handsome, articulate, and had a sincere, disarming smile. Piggy's older cousin watched the video 3 times, a shiver running down his spine. This Leo was dangerous. With a few simple, honest-sounding words, he had convinced his hopeless brother to willingly pursue an education. What else could he do? His father messaged him privately. You have to accept that some people in this world just have extraordinary charisma. It's not fake. It's real. When you meet someone like that, you do everything you can to become their friend, because they will attract other powerful people, and if you are one of them, you will go far. The vigilance and jealousy that had risen in the young man's heart were quieted by his father's words. I understand, he typed back. At first, I was unnerved, but he doesn't seem like a manipulative person. He seems genuinely happy. If we ever meet, I think we could be friends. It would be hard not to like him. That evening, every guest at the private kitchen received a complimentary, freshly made chicken cake from the owner. The whole restaurant was filled with a sweet, happy aroma. Even on a full stomach, there's always room for dessert. The weather forecast for the day was sunny, auspicious for cleaning, engagements, business openings, spiritual purification. Inauspicious for weddings, breaking ground, moving beds, funerals. Leo woke up, went through his morning routine, water with honey, bathroom, a morning run, and got ready. Richard Vance woke up early, just after 6. When he was young, he could never get enough sleep. Now that he was older, he couldn't stay asleep. He knew he should rest more, but his mind wouldn't let him. The best sleep he ever got was when he was broke. He was young then, fearless, ignorant, and happy. He could stay up for 3 days straight or curl up and sleep in any corner. Back then, he only had to feed himself. Later, as his company grew, so did his responsibilities and his desires. He'd hurt people and been hurt along the way. He'd done good things and bad things, but he didn't dwell on it. His insomnia was just age and the immense, unshareable pressure of his position. If he complained to someone about the stress of his billions, they'd tell him to give them the money and they'd happily take the stress off his hands. But the pressure was real. There was no going back, only forward. From a practical standpoint, sending Stella abroad to study didn't make much sense anymore. The education she'd get wasn't necessarily better. But he'd agreed with Victoria's plan because it provided an escape route, a backup plan. The older he got, the more cautious he became. He might be a fixture on the rich lists, but he couldn't afford to offend anyone. His pleasures were simple: spicy food, a little bourbon, a cigar. He wasn't a connoisseur, but he was smart enough and rich enough to buy the best of whatever he happened to like. Today, however, there was another reason for his early wake-up. His daughter had announced that her blonde boyfriend was coming to visit. Today. At first, he'd been relieved to hear she was dating. He'd had his first girlfriend at 16. Stella was 21. A little late, even, but she had his stubborn streak, and she'd never had to face any real hardship. He hadn't wanted her to, so maybe he'd overdone it with the cautionary tales, making her wary of the world. He was worried she'd never date, then worried she'd fall for the wrong person. Now, she was bringing someone home? Already? Was she sure? Shouldn't she date a few more people first? An empty, hollow feeling settled in his chest. He only had one daughter. He'd moved his entire life to be near her university, donated a building to the school, and now she was bringing a boy home. The thought was painful. Victoria was also up early. She was a woman who was used to being pampered. If the sky fell, her husband would hold it up. She had few worries. She'd summoned her personal beautician for a full treatment. Her daughter's boyfriend was coming for the first time. She had to look perfect. A man's and a woman's brains are wired completely differently. The father felt loss and a simmering, helpless anger. The mother was like a general preparing for battle, marshaling her forces for a flawless presentation. A truckload of fresh flowers had arrived at dawn. A chef was on standby. All she had to do was make herself beautiful. She'd already met Leo several times. Her feelings were complicated, but she had to admit, where else would you find a young man who could both brew a perfect cup of tea and paint a masterpiece? This wasn't just any boy. This was her future son-in-law. And his portrait of her daughter now hung in their home, its value soaring after a similar piece won the Alexander Lucci Prize. Day by day, the painting had worked its magic, making her warm to the real thing. Plus, he periodically sent gifts of exquisite tea and delicious food, all perfectly tailored to her tastes. Her daughter was strong-willed. A gentle, good-natured boy was a perfect match. So, Victoria had already been won over. She had, in fact, won herself over. Richard's foul mood was palpable, but he knew better than to take it out on his wife. He'd tried that before. The momentary satisfaction was followed by days of misery that always ended with him begging for forgiveness. The richest man in the world still had to apologize to his wife. A divorce would make her one of the richest women in the world. He watched her preen. Then the beautician turned to him. He flatly refused. Giving the kid a pleasant look was one thing. Getting gussied up for him? Never. Today, Richard Vance was a pufferfish. Do not touch. Richard picked at his breakfast, his mood as sour as ever. Victoria finally had enough. What is it? She asked, her voice dangerously calm. Are you upset she didn't find someone with a powerful background who could help your business? The question was a direct hit. He nearly choked on his shrimp dumpling. No, of course not. I can't believe how fast the time has gone. She has a boyfriend she's bringing home. It's hard, that's all. We agreed. We're a normal family. No arranged marriages for power. I promise. He knew how to placate her. Making his daughter a pawn in a business deal was never the plan. The entire point of building his empire was to give his family a good life, not sell them off for a better one. Then smile, she ordered. You look terrifying. You'll scare the boy away. Richard produced a smile so stiff it looked like it had been applied with Botox. After breakfast, he knew he should go to the office. There was always work to do, but if he left and came back, Victoria would explode. So he waited. Leo, showered and dressed after his morning run, had Lou drive him over. The assistant was practically vibrating with excitement, dropping the new boss off at the old boss's house. He could just imagine the look on Richard Vance's face. He had a 5-year-old daughter himself, and the thought of her bringing home some kid one day made him want to cry. But thinking about Richard's expression made him want to laugh. He had chosen the Bentley for the occasion. It was more stately. Leo had his license now, but he was too nervous to drive. His hands were slick with sweat. He'd gone over Lou's description of Richard Vance with Alex, who had provided a deeper analysis. Formidable but principled means he has incredible executive function. He knows exactly when to apply pressure and when to yield, Alex had explained. Leaving his enemies an out isn't mercy, it's risk management. It lowers the chance of retaliation and builds a reputation for playing by the rules, which attracts more partners. People are willing to follow him, means he's a proven winner. People don't follow nice guys. They follow leaders who can consistently deliver victory. He's a mature commander with both strategic wisdom and charisma. He's probably not a very sentimental person, but the good news is he's not going to kill you over a momentary flash of anger. He thinks bigger than that. Alex's analysis only made Leo more terrified. He remembered a business article he'd read, one that hinted at Richard Vance's shady, almost gangster-like origins. What had he done? He had slept with the daughter of a man who was essentially a mob boss. This was like raiding the dragon's lair and stealing his favorite jewel. Stella, sitting beside him in the car, sensed his tension and took his hand. Don't be nervous, she said, a rare smile playing on her lips. At home, my mom calls the shots, and you've met her. She likes you. My dad just looks intimidating. He's not actually mean. You know, I'm not nervous at all. Her hand was cool in his sweaty palm. She was enjoying this, he realized. The one being adored is always fearless. Even if her parents disapproved, there was nothing they could do. Besides, she knew Leo was a good person. They wouldn't disapprove. It was a classic case of what psychologists call love brain, a state where dopamine levels are so high that you're incapable of seeing any flaws in your partner. It creates a physiological bond that the brain misinterprets as a soul-deep connection. It's an addiction, and trying to break it causes genuine physical pain. Stella didn't think of herself as having love brain. She just held his hand, swinging it gently as the car wound its way through an exclusive gated community. The houses were set far apart, a sure sign of extreme wealth. Leo had been to the homes of professors and judges, even high-ranking officials in the capital, so he wasn't easily intimidated. But this was different. The iron gates opened onto a private road that seemed to circle for miles before they even saw the house. There were fountains, manicured gardens, rockeries, and pavilions. The mansion itself, a European-style estate, was nestled among the trees. The property seemed to be on a private bluff overlooking the ocean. The sheer scale of it was a slap in the face. What kind of normal person builds their house on a cliff? He thought, his mind racing. Is it for easy body disposal? How had Stella ever ended up with him? Maybe her judgment really was a little off. Stella squeezed his hand. She hadn't chosen him with her eyes. She had chosen him with her ears after hearing his song. Giant, ancient trees that would take two people to encircle flanked the entrance. A woman who looked like she'd stepped out of a period drama, the quintessential warm, friendly housekeeper, came bustling out to greet them, bowing slightly as she took Stella's bag. Leo held onto the gifts himself. It was a single, elegant wooden crate containing the liquor and tea, not heavy, but something he felt he should carry. Stella's parents weren't waiting at the door. There was still a long walk to the main living area. Lou had already departed, humming to himself as he drove the Bentley back down the long, winding road. Finally, in the grand entrance hall, Leo saw them. He recognized Victoria, of course, but today she was radiant, dressed as if for a glamorous evening gala. Every strand of her hair seemed to have been sculpted into a perfect wave. She wore a bespoke designer dress, a simple black top that flowed into a skirt painted with a vibrant, abstract floral pattern. It looked like the original version of 100 knockoffs you'd see at a street market, but the fabric, the cut, the way it held its shape, it was clearly a work of art. Her smile was warmer, more welcoming than he remembered. The man beside her was tall and powerfully built, but he had a surprisingly gentle, scholarly air. He was nothing like the cartoonish gangster Leo had imagined, with tattoos and a gold chain. He wasn't even the slick, photoshopped executive from the business magazines. The man standing before him was handsome, with a frank, open face and a disarming presence. Leo finally understood what Lou meant. Richard Vance had charisma. He was the kind of man who, in another era, would have been a great general, the kind of leader men would willingly follow in a battle. He seemed to loom a full head taller than Leo. All the tension drained out of Leo's body. He probably wasn't going to be thrown off a cliff today. Richard Vance was a man who had seen it all. But watching his daughter walk in hand with this blonde kid, he felt an internal explosion. He'd seen the kid's face 100 times. The portrait in his house had burned it into his memory. And now, the kid was a TV star. He'd heard the young women at his company chattering about the show. His daughter's $30 million investment was about to pay off spectacularly. Richard had expected the kid to be arrogant, puffed up with his newfound success. He'd even watched the kid scenes in the show. His wife saw a kind, talented soul burdened by a tragic past. She had cried buckets when Silas died. Richard, on the other hand, saw a cold, calculating, emotionless manipulator. He saw a threat. From Victoria's perspective, Leo was joining their family. From Richard's, he was stealing his daughter. But none of this showed on his face. He presented a picture of a handsome, friendly, approachable man, dressed casually in well-cut loungewear. He was the picture of non-aggression. Even as his mind seethed, Richard had to admit he understood the appeal. The kid wasn't strikingly handsome in a conventional way, but he radiated a gentle warmth. He had the kind of face that made you trust him instantly. No wonder his daughter, after being shown 100 examples of the worst men in the world, had fallen for this one.